across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome to the show. Alex Phillips is back yet again, sitting in for Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, who is cooling his heels with his dog down in Cornwall. And his wife, of course, we mustn't forget the wife. So I'm going to be with you until 10 o'clock tonight, rumbling through all of the news stories, those that you're aware of and those that you are not. And on that platter of deliciousness, I'm going to be sprinkling a fair amount of pretty strong opinion as well. So I hope you like your condiments hot and spicy, because I don't want to let you down, and it's going to be a buffet of broadcasting brilliance, if I don't say so myself. And that would be made all the more brilliant, as all buffets are, by having a lot of people at the table sticking their dirty paws on all of the platters, metaphorically speaking. And in order to do that, you're going to need the following numbers. That is, if you want to call me and be part of the show. Sharing is caring, one and all. If you would like to speak to me in person, you can register your interest at any point, and the lovely Freezer will pick up the phone and make sure that you are sane enough to be patched through to the studio. It's 03444 991000, charged at your normal network rate. You can also use that number to ping me over a cheeky little WhatsApp or leave me a voice note. I really like a voice note. I say this every time, I just don't get enough of them. 87222 is the number to send me a text message if you want to go down the old-fashioned SMS avenue. Be my guest, but you will have to signpost the direction of travel for your text by writing the word talk before you send the message. That way, it rattles around amongst all the space junk and bypasses all the aeroplanes seeding clouds above the Atlantic and finds its way into my studios right here. We are also on social media at talkTV. And yeah, lots coming up, so I may as well step on it, because it's a good old newsy day and I'm looking forward to telling you about the lot of it. Let's kick off with the latest postcode lottery to be blighting Britain. Yes, it's not about GP appointments, nor is it whether you can get an NHS dentist. I mean, pretty much that's nobody these days. It's not about how many recycling bins you've got and what colour they are, or indeed, if you're Birmingham, if your bins are being collected at all. No, this time the latest postcode lottery that's set to descend upon our fair isle is relating to the cost of your energy. Because Ed Miliband, Ed Zero, as I've decided he's now called, has been looking at zonal pricing, where electricity will be cheaper in some parts of the country than others. It would lead to prices being determined by supply and demand in each area. So, you know, if like me, you happen to be in the southeast because that's where Talk Towers is located, so you kind of have to be in and around London, you're going to be screwed. You're already screwed on your rent. You're already screwed on your council tax. You're already screwed on the price of a pint in a pub. So they may as well just make your water, your electricity, the lot of it beyond your reach. Right. Let's kick off that one by speaking with Ralph Schulhammer, political theorist, head of the Centre for Applied History at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium in Budapest, MCC, as it is otherwise known, thankfully. Ralph, great to have you back on the programme. Why? I mean, the bare basics I know about the energy market is we've got the highest energy costs in the world because we insist on tying the cost of our electricity to global gas prices or global wholesale prices, whereas other countries don't do this. And now it turns out you're going to be punished if you live somewhere where everyone else lives.
I mean, I think the simple answer to this question is the reason why energy prices in Britain are high is because Britain has sabotaged its own energy production. As a matter of fact, supply and demand still works, even in the energy sector. And if you reduce your energy production, or if you make it almost impossible for energy producers to produce energy, be it, you know, in the North Sea, be it coal miners, you name it, be it nuclear power plants, no, whatever comes to mind, then prices go up. This is not a mystery. And what Mr. Miliband is suggesting is basically rationing. By the way, it's going to be an interesting wrinkle. If you say, well, areas where more energy is needed, it's going to be more expensive. Where less energy is needed, it's going to be cheaper. you have to explain this to those people who support Mr. Miliband's plan to turn off, as it happened, the coal-powered steel plants and replace them with electric arc furnaces, because they're going to need a lot of electricity. So Britain already has, I think, the highest electricity prices of every industrial nation. So you make it even more expensive for industry. At some point, Britain will be left without industry. And I think this is not something we would relish.
Right, and I mean, on top of that, you've got Ed Miliband, who actually wants to pour cement down the old gas pipelines. I'm happy for cement to be put down them as long as Ed Miliband goes in first. He also wants to cover the countryside in solar panels, but probably he can't do that now because they're all made in China by slaves, and people in his party have told him it's probably not a good look to be buying stuff that's been created under forced labour, even if it is to save the planet, I say sarcastically, doing the inward exclamation points. But get this right, this is going to make you laugh, Ralph. Do you need a laugh this Thursday?
Oh, I think I know what you're going to get to.
I don't know if you do, but if you do, then actually, do you know what? I'm going to do mine, and I want to know whatever yours is, because you've clearly got one in mind, and it's probably going to be better than mine. My laugh of the day is Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie saying, obsession with net zero by 2050 will push bills up further. It's going to risk rolling blackouts. It'll make Britain more reliant on China. Until Labour heed our calls to abandon the mad dash to net zero, they'll only make families poorer. What? Whose calls? The Conservatives invented this stuff. It was Boris Johnson's obsession with COP whatever number it was. We're going to lead the world in net zero. They were the ones who signed all the treaties and put it into legislation. And then they go, well, you know, this is a bad idea. If only Labour would listen to us. Are you kidding me?
No, I mean, the energy policy, both in the UK and in continental Europe over the last 30 years was run by complete morons. And I don't use this term lightly, but it is true. Boris Johnson once talked about the UK becoming the Saudi Arabia of wind. I think Ed Miliband is talking about the rooftop solar revolution, which is just as ludicrous. I was thinking you would mention this new great idea that is now pushed, which is that you put some, I don't know what it is, some form of special dust into the atmosphere to deflect rays from the sun. So you say solar is the future, and simultaneously you say we have to make sure that there is less sun or less sun rays reaching the planet in order to cool the planet. It's completely absurd. By the way, the only thing that Ed Miliband should do is either collect trash in Birmingham, or he can join his brother David Miliband, who is one of the major grifters with the whole NGO US aid, scheme that has been uncovered over recent years. But this man should be nowhere near a responsible position or a position of authority in government. Yeah,
I wouldn't even have him walking my dog, let alone collecting the bins. I wouldn't trust him in a real world job for a second. Now, I'm glad you brought out this government experiment, because I haven't heard many people talking about it. And I love going down a wormhole, and I love a conspiracy theory. And cloud seeding's been bubbling around in my periphery for a while. And I'm like, I've kind of heard of this. People do it. Don't they do it in the UAE to, like, whack a bit of gubbins in the sky to make clouds rain or something? I don't know. But I don't like people messing about with nature. So I was quite surprised when I learned that ARIA, the Advanced Research and Innovation Agency, which the government has given 50 million quid to, is about to start outdoor experiments, including injecting aerosols into the atmosphere or brightening clouds to reflect sunshine. Like you said, oh yeah, let's have a load of solar panels and then make sure the sun can't get to it. I'm going to call these Frankenstein clouds, for want of a better phrase. There you go, you heard it here first, I've coined it. Stratospheric aerosol injection, whereby tiny particles are released into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight, or marine cloud brightening, in which ships would spray sea salt particles into the sky to enhance the reflectivity of low-flying clouds. And apparently, lucky old us, ARIA will be making very clear when their experiments are going to be taking place, and they're also going to be looking into seeding cirrus clouds. Now, maybe this is brilliant. Maybe this is the tech of the future. Maybe someone's going to message me or phone in and say, no, I'm on the other side of this. Like, I know how all this stuff works, and it's actually genius.
But Alex, let's be honest. Whoever in Britain complained about too much sun? Like, this is something nobody ever said. Like, the idea that there's too much sun in Britain is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And there's always a more, let's say, darker side to this whole story. I mean, this is a government who cannot take care of the garbage in the streets, but the very heavens That we can do, that we can change. It's absurd. It's incompetence in the areas that really matter, paired with complete hubris in these insane global climate ideas. I mean, the only good news, which I believe are slowly but surely happening, and I think the Europeans, including the Brits, will be the last ones to realize it. The green movement is over. It's dying. It's dying in the United Kingdom. It's dying all over the planet. And at some point, it also will reach us. And by the way, just a quick note, the country that is currently gorging itself the most on coal is China. I mean, I tip my hat to the Chinese. They have been deceiving the entire planet with their, oh, we do all this wind and solar to protect the environment. No, they just did it a little bit as an add-on. Their main energy source is still coal, which, by the way, Britain would have as well. The United States have recently said, their energy minister, Chris Wright, that the US will stop mothballing coal power plants because, as an important point, industry and artificial intelligence are direct derivatives of energy, of electricity. If you don't have it, you cannot have a leading position in those areas. And at some point, people must realize, without industry, you will get poorer. Like that, you cannot all become brokers on, in the city of London or somewhere else if there is nothing left to trade with. So This is really what people have to realize.
But also, not just that. If you push this country in a situation where it continues to be energy reliant on imported gas from ne'er-do-well countries, and then ne'er-do-well types like the Houthi rebels or Russia playing silly nitwits in various maritime routes, stopping cargo ships packed full of our LNG from getting here, and we start having blackouts in the country, I can only imagine the first time London has a blackout, you'll wake up in the morning to find every single shop window and every single shoe zone kicked in.
Alex, but this is what the government, and this is really important, because this is what the government is now doing. You will not have traditional blackouts where simply the grid is overloaded. What's going to happen is they will make electricity so expensive that certain people, I'm exaggerating, but only slightly, simply can no longer afford to turn the lights on. So they can say, oh, there are no blackouts. The people just choose not to turn the lights on. They just choose not to run the washer and dryer. They just choose not to turn on the heating. But what it is, in fact, is you avoid the blackouts by preemptively preventing people from using energy in the first place. But it's the same thing. If you cannot heat the apartment, if you cannot turn on your coffee or your tea maker whenever you want, you are poorer. Your life is more miserable. And this is the only direction in which the current path that Miliband and everybody else is putting your country on, where this is leading.
The look of horror in my eyes, Ralph, is because you just brought tea into this. I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, there is going to be civil war if the British can't boil a kettle. That'll be it. It'll be done. It'll be over. The country will have gone to the dogs.
I don't know. We hear this all the time, and I'm saying this very carefully because I don't want to be. I say it provocatively. I'm being hyperbolic now, but for most of the time, I was fearing a civil war. But I'm starting slowly to say maybe there should be one. Again, I'm being hyperbolic here, but only slightly. No, but it's true. How much longer do ordinary people, or ordinary British people, ordinary European people have to take it?
Yeah.
We are being sabotaged by our own governments on every issue, from migration to the economy to energy. I'm not sure if anybody who's currently in power has any interest in the 80% of the people that are suffering under their policies. And honestly, as the saying goes, I'm quoting Thomas Jefferson, right? In a country where the government fears the people is a democracy, and where the people fear the government, it's a tyranny. And I think we are very close to the tyranny pole.
Oh, we totally are. That's a good quote. I'm going to use that one. We're about the same age, if not the exact same age, I think, Ralph. And someone's just messaged me, Chris, saying, hi, Alex. Didn't they say in the 70s that aerosols were destroying the ozone? Now they clean on a pump. I mean, I don't know what kind of aerosols and this, that and the other. But I do remember when I was doing geography at school in the 90s, in the textbook, it was all about the hole in the ozone layer and not being able to have hairspray and, Lynx Africa and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, if you did that, you'd have acid rain. And you just think, messing about. I don't know, like nature has taken millions, no, billions, no, trillions of years constantly refining itself through this process of evolution to create an ecosystem within which life can thrive. And we currently have various space agencies poking about different corners of the universe, looking if they can find any sort of single-celled organism in some faraway galaxy. And then here they're just like, yeah, let's mess with what we've got. Nature didn't really do a good job. Let's just pump some stuff up into the atmosphere. That's going to work.
It's also, I think we also have to mention, like, one of the main energy sources of the future is probably going to be natural gas. And I want just to remind all your viewers, we have gas stoves in our apartments because it's a wonderfully clear burning form of hydrocarbons. So we are constantly getting better in reducing our emissions. The question is, do we have to sacrifice our living standards to be slightly better than we already are? It's a complete nonsense argument from the left. The planet is not on the brink of collapse. Nothing is on the brink of collapse except our economy, except our political systems. And they continue to push into this direction. I think that Ed Miliband, much more than Nigel Farage or anybody else, is the biggest threat to democracy in Britain, because at some point the British people will say, we no longer going to take it. First they're going to say it at the voting booth, but at some point they're also going to say it in the streets. And I'll say, I'm a little bit further away at the moment, but I stand with the British people if they should ever decide to do so.
See, you know you're far enough away for the British Rozzers not to come knocking on your door because you're inciting insurrection. Lucky you.
I celebrated. I might be not in Britain, but I celebrated St. George's Day or St. George's Day, or however you want to call it, because I'm very well aware what the world and modern civilization owes to the British people. I'm very sad to see that many people who live in Britain have no gratitude for the great things that your country has done for humanity overall. And it's very, very sad. Nobody is perfect, but I think the British, when it counted, were more perfect than anybody else.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. That's a lovely way to go into the advert break. Let's remind everybody what we invented: the computer, the internet, the telephone, the television, the steam engine, railway lines, vaccines. Yeah, we're pretty damn good. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but stay tuned, because we're not going to let Ralph Schulhammer go anywhere. I'm going to be asking him all about the EU's youth mobility scheme after this.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show, and here's a little interesting tidbit that you otherwise would not know. So I'm sitting here in the studio by myself, but just the other side of the glass, I've got my incredible team of producers and techies, and my incredible team today is made up entirely of girls. Woohoo! It's amazing. I've never seen that before. I'm looking through the glass window and it's like the Spice Girls of broadcasting. It's amazing. God love them. Anyway, to balance things out, we're going to have a token man, aren't we? So let's bring back Ralph Schulhammer. Ralph, welcome back to the show. Right. I think
the diversity hire.
You are the diversity hire, exactly. Exactly. Now, I think we discussed this one before, but it's now going to happen, it seems, and this is the EU's mobility scheme, the Youth Mobility Scheme. Doesn't that sound nice? This would potentially allow Europeans to temporarily live and work in the UK. The Chancellor said that is no return to freedom of movement, except it is freedom of movement, but just with an age limit. And she's very enthusiastic. She says that a temporary visa for young adults in the EU who wanted to live and work in the UK would deliver an economic boost. And I'm there thinking, hang on, couple of things here, Yvette, my love. First of all, last time I looked at our unemployment figures, the people who are least likely to be in work in the UK are the 18 to 24-year-olds. Like a third of them have all gone batty and are too scared to leave the house. They're on long-term sick, they're mental health leave and all the rest of it. And the other half don't want to work, and there's a load who just can't even get jobs. So how these people, you know, I think we need to deal with those before we start shipping in Germans and whatnot. But here's my hunch, Ralph. I have a feeling if you suddenly allow people in Spain and Germany and Denmark and all the rest of it, youngsters, to just come to Britain and live and work here without any sort of need for, you know, a job, proper visa, that sort of thing, I think we're just going to get all the young migrants they don't want. What do you reckon?
No, I think that's true. And I sometimes don't understand why a rather simple topic is being made so complicated by politicians. As you just said, I think the British companies should be absolutely at liberty to hire people they need from abroad. You know, just like talkTV is talking to me and I'm sitting abroad, so I would feel slightly uncomfortable because apparently I'm doing a job that no Brit wants to do.
Yeah, but we don't want you to have a visa, Ralph. You're too dangerous. You'll start the insurrection. So, you know, we have to keep you remote.
All right. I knew that would happen. And if somebody has a job offer and is qualified, I think then there should be a process, ideally a simple process, the way the United States are attempting to do it now, to get that person to Britain. But just to have, again, freedom of movement, as you correctly said, where then anybody who just happens to get into the Schengen area or is one of the beneficiaries of the very generous handout of citizenships in continental Europe can then come to Britain, I think that would be a mistake. I mean, I always wonder, what was the whole point of Brexit? If Brexit is something that never really happened. I feel there was people who say, "Oh, Brexit was horrible," and my answer is always, "Well, did it really happen?"
Yes, there
was the vote, and then there were some areas here and there, but it feels like it's something that never took place in the way it originally was intended, and that is autonomy and sovereignty of the British people, of the British government over its borders. And it was always possible if you're qualified to go to the United Kingdom. And it's like saying, oh, nobody can go to the UK. That is not true. It's just slightly more difficult. But on the other hand, why shouldn't it be? I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And, you know, this is the thing. We have a huge problem with the small boats crisis. Young men getting into dinghies in Calais and coming over to the solar reflective white cliffs of Dover. And I'm pretty certain if the French wanted to expedite their passage somewhat, they could just hand out some French passports to the lot of them, or some sort of identity cards, and say, there you go, you can now get on the train.
No, absolutely. I mean, Britain should say very clearly that they would be willing to have any negotiation about freedom of movement must be tied to continental Europe, or the EU being capable of protecting its borders. I mean, the same, of course, applies, by the way, to Britain as well. I mean, this is, and we talked about this so often, Alex, and also with your viewers and listeners. I mean, it's so absurd. The simple refusal of the European governing elite to protect the borders is staggering. I mean, this has not changed. Again, the exception of the United States, but this has not changed. There is no willingness to reduce the kind of migration from outside of Europe, from non-Western, non-European parts of the world. And if you cannot control that, at some point people will also turn against inner European migration. And that's very, very sad, because I think that most British people, just as most Germans, would not have a problem with somebody from London moving to Berlin or somebody moving from Berlin to London. But now, as you correctly point out, there is the suspicion that it's not going to be Hans and Franz that's going to come from Germany, but it's Ahmed and Mohammed. And let's be very blunt here, you have more than enough of those already. Yes, I know that sounds horrible, but we all feel it, and we know it's true.
We know it's true. I mean, is this why you find yourself in Budapest? Because it's one of the last sort of bastions of sensible politics in Europe, with a high trust society and a preserved heritage and culture and a flat tax rate of about 15%.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the point is very simple for me. If I'm in Hungary, I like to see Hungarians. When I'm in Britain, I want to see Brits. And when I'm in Germany, I want to see Germans. By the way, I'm always befuddled that the same people who attack that argument as supposedly being racist are the same people who constantly tell me that Ukraine must be for the Ukrainians. I'm just demanding the same thing that the left wants for Ukraine for my own country. I don't see why that's such a big problem. And my suspicion is, and I think this became very clear in Britain over the last couple of days, there is a clear segment, a strong segment of the elite that hates their own country, that hates their own culture, and that hates their own civilization. It's very obvious to me. And migration is basically a way to dilute your own civilization and feel good about it, but it's a way to destroy it.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, England has it bad when it comes to migration, but I get the feeling that other continental European countries might even have it worse. And actually, maybe not even the continental ones, Scandinavian ones. I mean, Sweden looks like a fiery hellhole most of the time. Who do you think's at the bottom of the league table?
Well, it depends if you look at the cities, right? I think there it's a running battle who is worst off. I mean, there are parts of London. There's Malmö. I mean, we just recently looked at the numbers in Vienna. I mean, 41% of public middle and elementary schools are now Muslim. The future 41%? Of Vienna. 41% in public Vienna? Schools in Vienna. So the future of Vienna is one of the Muslim cities. So we might, defeat the Turk siege in 1683, but I'm not sure that we can do it again. And for your listeners who enjoy the Trapp family and the Sound of Music, we're going to move from how to solve a problem like Maria to how to solve a problem like Sharia. This is where we are headed. But I think that Britain is on the same, like this, all of Europe and including Britain, like it's the same destination. We are just on different trains.
Oh, it's so tragic. We could actually riff on the Sound of Music quite a lot, because I just thought the hills are alive with the sound of imams.
The world is going to be a worse place without Hungarians, Italians, Austrians, Germans, French, and of course also English, Scots, and even, I'm joking, and even the Irish, right? I think it's going to be, I was joking to all the Irish listeners, this was supposed to be a joke, but it's going to be a worse place. This is the thing, I'm all for diversity on the planet, but I'm also for a level of homogeneity within countries. I like the idea that Germany is German, that Britain is British, that France is French. I don't understand why this has become such a contentious issue or such a provocative thing to say.
Oh, I don't know either, Ralph, but I'm looking forward to you coming over here, donning your spurs and your riding boots, finding a suitable mount and being one of the original 21st century cavaliers. You will be most welcome. I'll make sure that they give you a visa. That is Ralph Schulhammer, ladies and gentlemen, one of my favourites. And coming up after the break is one of my other favourites. I'm absolutely delighted to say that James Price is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about whether a future Prime Minister might be creating the position of a Minister for deportations. If you want to get involved and join the conversation at any point, the number is on the screen. For those of you listening on the radio, it's 03444 99 1000. If you would like to share your thoughts and feelings on all the things we're talking about today, you can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a lovely little voice note. To text me, it's 87222. Remember to put the word talk before you write your message. And we're on X at talkTV. I'm back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Thankfully, I was paying attention to the sounds in my ear because me and the girls are doing a cryptic crossword during the advert break. That's what we do with our 1 minute, 30 seconds of holiday in between segments of the show. Right, James Price joins us now, former Conservative Government Special Advisor. Hello there, James.
I've not got the cryptic crossword nailed down at all, so I'm glad that someone's doing it.
Yeah, I think basically I'm one of the last living, breathing humans on the planet to do cryptic crosswords. I always meet people who are older than me, who are sort of really wise, sensible people who've got degrees from Oxford and things like that, as do you, I believe, or one of those. And I always say, oh, you know, can you help me with my cryptic? I've only got a couple of clues left. And they'll say, oh, I don't know how to do cryptics. And I'm like, what? Does nobody do the cryptic crossword anymore? Is it only me?
You'll have to do a special and teach all of us how to do it to keep this great British tradition alive.
Yeah, I really could. Here we go. One down. Tense and unusually tight initially. 4 letters. And that was the first clue I've put on the grid. And it's taut, T-A-U-T, because it's tense and unusually tight initially, i.e. the first letters of each word, T-A-U-T, also meaning tense. Taut. There you go. That is how they're done.
Me thinking it was Ed Miliband's grasp of economics.
Probably Ed Miliband's something else is tense and unusually tight as well, but I don't really bear thinking about that one. Right, let's talk now about Nigel Farage, because he has come out with a statement today that will probably titillate the grassroots reform voters. Let's have a listen.
This Labour government claim they've increased deportations, but all they've done is to send away visa overstayers and those who are happy to voluntarily return, often with £3,000 in their pocket. We will demand, this government does the same, that there is a minister for deportations. It will be part of the Home Office, but it'll be a separate department within it. We will need to recruit new people, as much of the evidence is that those that currently work in the Home Office would willfully obstruct policy if we won the next general election. But somebody somewhere in government needs to be held accountable.
Well, there you go. That, to me, is very much a rallying cry to the grassroots, having, I think, for a while been lambasted and criticised by some people, particularly on X, who didn't think that he was being Farageist enough. And that, of course, created that split in the party between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage in, well, a sort of mythical split, but also a split that then did happen. But he's come out batting today, some might say, James.
Yeah, so I'll answer this in 2 parts. And the first, I think that it's excellent that you've got leaders of big parties, and Reform is a big party now, talking about this. I think it's a really important issue. I think it's a sort of thing that politicians have been scared to talk about for too long. Donald Trump comes along in America and deals with the problem there. You look at their southern border, it's incredibly porous. Millions of illegal people have flooded into the United States. We've got a similar problem of illegal people coming over here, whether it's in small boats or whether it's in lots of other ways as well. People overstaying visas, people smuggling in under false pretenses, becoming asylum seekers, changing to economic migrants. It's a big problem. There are plenty of routes for people who want to legally come into this country who can actually contribute economically or would be compatible with our way of life. So I think it's really, really important that we've got Reform talking about it. That will hopefully spur the Conservatives to talk about it as well. That will even perhaps spur this ghastly Labour government to do something about it too. The one problem I've got is that just having a minister to do this and a minister to do that, still, I say this with my former advisor hat on, is slightly surface level thinking, if I can be so bold as to criticise this just a little bit. There's already someone whose job title it is as a minister in the Home Office to do this. So there's already somebody who's being held accountable. It's some faceless Labour minister at the moment, but it's part of their job title. And if you think that they're not doing it well enough and that a Reform future government or a Conservative future government or maybe a Reform Conservative alliance would have someone who has that role in their job description at some point, it's really about the rest of it. As Farage, to be fair, says, hiring a lot more people, giving it enough resources, giving it enough time inside Parliament to get the legislation done, to get the extra powers we need to do this, to explain it to the country at large, to have the other kind of technical things you need to do to tighten up the borders to make sure people don't come back. So all of that stuff has to be done as well. It's not just enough to say, oh, there's a minister in charge, but it's a good start, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Reform have said repeatedly they want to leave the ECHR. I believe they want to scrap the Human Rights Act as well to make, or get out all the sort of, separate the chaff from the wheat and make sure all of the nonsense of identity politics adherent codswallop that's used by crimos and migrants in order to find loopholes in our system is no longer present within our courts. But getting an actual minister for deportations, I suppose some might say it sharpens the mind, because we know how many people are in this country illegally. We know as well, when people sort of get out the old who's on the deportations list clipboard, it's those who have come into the country illegally recently, those who have been in the country illegally for Lord knows how long, those who have committed crimes, who were born abroad, who frankly should be immediately deported, and potentially others as well. I don't know who that would be necessarily. But do you think actually creating a specific role in the cabinet, A, it indicates that this is going to be a keystone policy of reform should they actually form that cabinet, but B, it concentrates the mind, because the Home Office arguably is having to do 85 gazillion things at once, is looking after prisons, the police force, etc., passports, ID cards, I mean, Lord knows what. We've had a Minister for Immigration before. I believe it was Chris Phillips when it was the Conservative Party. I have no idea if Labour has one or who it is. No doubt if they do have one, they'll have a hairstyle like a Lego creature. But, you know, it does show serious intent. And I think it does sort of say, we're going to clear the decks and this is going to be a focus and we're going to make sure it is a focus.
Yeah, I definitely agree that these things should be a focus. I think it's one of the biggest priorities that any future government will deal with. I suppose the boring answer I've got, again, it's sort of my hobby horse, the inability of the British state to get anything done. The state capacity is very, very low, right? We can't stop a couple of small dinghies crossing over the channel. This was the same channel that stopped the Spanish Armada, that stopped Napoleon, that stopped Hitler, and so on. So we're very, very low in terms of our ability to get things done. And that's not going to change just by having one minister to do it. I would like to see actually the American style system where people will know there's a transition period between the election and then the inauguration of the new president, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people all change jobs. They've all therefore got skin in the game. They're all outsiders who are coming in, bringing in new experiences, bringing in real world experience perhaps of running big organizations, large businesses, other things like that. And let's get those people in, rather than what happened in July, where literally only 200 people changed jobs between the Conservatives and Labour. 100 ministers, 100 advisors like me. They're the only people who changed. So I think that this is a good start again, but let's have a big smash up of the whole system and get lots of outside expertise in there to actually get things done, rather than career civil servants who don't really care if any of these things happen because they're still going to get their fat pension anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this from a lot of people who have formed parts of government and said it's all very well moaning about this minister, that minister. You have no idea about the blob, how intransigent the civil service is, how actually a fair amount of ministers are just useless cretins who are basically marionettes controlled by the civil service equivalent, who's the head of that department, who's the one who says, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You're going to have to do this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Look, even the cabinet meetings themselves, a lot of the notes that the secretaries of state go in there have been written for them by civil servants ahead of time. It's been shared with the other civil servants. So it's almost like theatre in too many of these cases. And maybe people who are watching and listening will now start to get a sense of why it is that things are sliding down, nothing ever gets done. Because, of course, again, if the only person who ever gets fired is, as you say, it's the marionette puppet, and you just change the puppet who's reading the lines, that ain't going to cut it. The same people who make all the mistakes stay in post, probably get promoted. And if a civil servant does something really terrible, like, allow hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants in over the last few years, allowing people with bogus asylum claims who then their sons go around and stab loads of people to death and all these horrible things, they don't get punished. The only way, in fact, to get them out of those important jobs often is to promote them to some other position. It is absolutely farcical. And so I hope that reform, like I know the Conservatives are to an extent as well, are looking at these really fundamental things. It might not be very sexy, but this is the really important way you can actually have the government be in control of the government again. And only when you've got that can we fix the important things like mass deportations, like the floundering economy, like what Ed Miliband is doing, like what they're doing to schools, and so on and so on.
Do you know, I would really like that geezer from America, because of course Trump's second term will be over by the time we have well, not necessarily, depends when we have our elections, but technically Trump will likely no longer be president. And I wonder what's going to happen to some of his appointees, because there's that guy, is it Tom Homan or something?
You got it.
I love that guy. Anyone who doesn't know him, he's in charge of, is it called ICE or something? The immigration, he's the deportations minister for America, or whatever the equivalent title may be. And he's just this scary bloke. I mean, he's a he's a gnarly type. And
I've seen someone on Twitter describe him as having medieval pike man physiognomy. He's exactly the sort of person you want to pull up the barricade of a castle moat or something.
Well, I kind of imagine, a sort of special package from Trump being delivered to Nigel Farage to wish him luck in the new job. And it sort of arrives by boat and it gets taken up to the White Cliffs of Dover, and it's some sort of big cage with a black cloak over it saying, beast inside, handle with care. And someone lifts up the edge and there's Tom Homan.
Of course,
waiting to go out and scare off the dinghies.
However scary he does seem, this guy, and some of the other Trump people do, I think we also need, as people on the right, which every sensible person should be, is to think that actually the humane thing to do is to have borders that are secure. Both America and Britain have all sorts of routes for people to sensibly and safely come and contribute if they're able to contribute. And the kinds of people who flooded across both the British border with France across the Channel are people we're now seeing are hanging around outside primary schools, all sorts of other incompatibilities they have with our ways of life. The kind of people flooding into America, the same as well. So every time you try and go, actually look at poor, what's her name, AOC in America, doing a stunt where she's pretending to cry in front of a border wall or whatever, what she's crying about is preventing some of the nastiest people illegally slipping into our countries and doing horrible things. The humane kind thing is to be like this guy Tom Homan and have secure borders. As Ronald Reagan said, you've got to have big walls. They should have gates in there too. That's the proper way to do these things.
Yeah, and you know what? I make the point time and again because I don't think it's made enough. Very often when you look at the people trafficking routes and what goes on from genesis to delivery, there is a reason why we get a lot of young men. And one of the reasons is because further along the route, before they get over to Calais, the women have largely been plucked off because they are sent into the sex trade, or if they're lucky, domestic servitude, to be sold on the black market as slaves. And if you're a teenager of a particular age, well, your fate is probably not going to be as bright because you're probably going to find yourself whisked off for a bit of organ harvesting. So this is the point. If you are allowing this trade to continue and people traffickers, who are some of the most inhumane, violent, evil, wicked, demonic people on this planet, if you're lining their pockets with gold by not stopping this, you're also directly enabling the funding of terrorist organizations, the destabilizing of our countries by third countries who really frankly want us to end up in civil war. But you are also basically enriching and enabling some of the cruelest, most violent, despicable acts to be committed against human beings. It's that simple. James, don't go anywhere because I'm going to chew your brain over a bit more politics after this next advert break. And remember, if you want to get in touch and join the conversation, send me a message, send me a WhatsApp, get on the blower and actually chat to me. The numbers are on the screen now. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you want to register your interest. And we'll be doing lots of calls and messages in the next hour. Same number for WhatsApp. You can also leave me a voice note on that number. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. I'm back after this.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
So with this very...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and welcome back as well to James Price, former Conservative spad. I like the word spad. It doesn't sound like a particularly polite word. James, although I do love you, even though you were once a spad. The Tories, your party, your old party, your current party, I don't know where your allegiances lie, apparently set to lose half of their council seats amid a reform surge. If that happens, will Kemi Badenoch survive it?
I think my overall loyalty, of course, is to the country and obviously to talkTV. You know that.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think she will survive. Yes, I think that it's probably factored in that it's not going to be a very good time for the Conservative Party. I think not enough time has elapsed since we were in government, and that reform does have a lot of momentum going for it now. People are willing to roll the dice and give these people a chance. I suppose one of the problems is a slightly be careful what you wish for moment for reform, because it's always been a problem with a lot of parties that Nigel Farage has led, that you attract, as well as lots of excellent and very sound people, some slightly kooky ones as well. And so the kind of problems that they will have, there was, I think, one candidate who had turned out was a member of the BNP. Not that BNP, but the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party, which is extraordinary. And I think he was also the same person who said that paying reparations for slavery was a really good thing. So you might find that in all sorts of corners of this wonderful country, you're getting some oddballs who do get elected, and that may be a challenge.
But then I say this to you, I was having exactly this conversation over lunchtime today, because there's been a lot of complaints within Reform that the vetting procedures are onerous, that they are kicking people out for sort of saying something, just mentioning the word Tommy Robinson or something back in 2010 in a Facebook post, and they're told, no, get out, you're not going to qualify, we can't have you as a candidate. And there's been a lot of disquiet about this. But what I was saying to someone over lunch was the thing is, whether it's UKIP or the Brexit Party, the two legacy parties have both developed attack units to comb through every candidate, every councillor, to try and find the oddballs, the people who have made disgraceful remarks, the man who thought that flooding was down to gay marriage, etc. Given it to the newspapers then whack it all over the front pages, and everyone goes, well then, you know, Nigel Farage's party, always full of fruitcakes, lunatics and closet racists. And yet, when you actually do the same to the other parties, the legacy parties, and look and analyse at the people within their midst, you find murderers and paedophiles and con artists. You find a heck of a lot of pretty frightening and dangerous people. But I think the legacy parties, when it comes to sort of attacking each other for who they might have at local council level or as a branch chairman, etc., don't bother doing that. It would feel like internecine warfare, because they just turn their guns on each other. But both of the parties actually turn their guns on reform. So I think that actually Nigel's been left with a pretty, difficult task to fulfill, which is making sure he fields the most number of candidates for these local elections, and making sure he does whatever it takes so as to avoid these sorts of attacks happening by the legacy parties.
Yeah, it does give one a very dim view of human nature, that so many people in positions where they're receiving the most amount of scrutiny turn out to have all kinds of skeletons in their closets. Is this a sort of thing that everybody has, and it's just that in politics it gets caught out, or does politics attract a certain kind of a wrong on occasions, or does politics turn people into that? It's a very deep worrying question, that hopefully we can still get the wheat from the chaff, as you mentioned earlier, and get good people, because it's a noble calling to try and stand up and serve your country. The thing, I suppose, you asked about my actual political party allegiance, and I suspect that my thinking on this is similar to lots of people. I'm very upset with my own party and our failures, and I'll accept my share of the blame for some of that, but I did try and do the kind of best stuff that I could. You then go and look at reform and you think this is actually really exciting. They don't have the baggage. I'm tempted by this. And then the sort of fallout from, without going into it too much, the Rupert Lowe point will make some people look and go, well, I think I'm quite a talented person. Why do I want to go into this party that doesn't look like it can handle talented people, and responded with the same kind of HR language that the legacy parties use? And I thought that reform was supposed to be, anti all that kind of woke, overly sensitive stuff. So I think that, again, is going to be one of the growing pains of reform if it continues to grow as a party, how it balances professionalizing with not going for those kind of knee-jerk HR, we must slap everybody down, exactly as you say, Alex, because then you will just get the same kind of boring automatons, and you want people who've got that vigour to go and change the country.
I mean, what's astonishing here, looking at the polling by the Tory peer Lord Hayward, who is also a polling expert, his prediction is that the Conservatives would win between 375 and 425 seats, which for them represents a loss of around 500 seats, and says that many of those losses would be to Reform, who he predicts would win between 400 and 450 seats, with the Labour Party winning only 280 seats, which means out of all of the parties listed here, we're looking at Reform having the most seats in these council elections. And I would imagine a lot of these people may never have even been councillors before. So we could end up with councils up and down the country where these elections have been allowed to take place, who are filled with people without much experience in the role. Is that a good thing? Is that something that we should be positive about, because it's going to breathe fresh air and fresh blood and fresh eyes into politics at a local level? Or do you think this comes with its own perils?
I'll do a ghastly politician's answer and say that it's probably going to be a bit of both, isn't it? I think the really exciting thing will be that you'll start getting future members of parliament, maybe future ministers from all these parties growing up through these areas. Well, I think a problem you sometimes get, and the Conservative Party has definitely been guilty of this, is of taking people who have only ever really been a local councillor and not done anything else and don't have life experience when it comes into Westminster itself, into the Houses of Parliament. I think what's going to be really exciting as well is you might start seeing councils that need to have various kind of coalition agreements, perhaps between Reform and the Conservatives, as a way of keeping the lefties out, which might augur and presage a potential for that happening in 4 years' time. I think that would be, for me, a very exciting thing to see if, no one party looks like it can get a majority at Westminster in a few years' time, a Conservative Reform coalition. It's almost the best of both worlds, because you get some of those people with scars on their back, an experience of having to deal with the blob we just talked about before inside Whitehall, and you've got the revolutionary fervour of Reform who are clean skins when it comes to this. And that will be probably the only way to keep the Labour Party out. And that, I think, is probably the most essential thing for the survival of this country. So let's see if both parties, if this does happen like that, can form those sorts of coalitions, and see if we can work out where the agreements lie, because I suspect we probably, as the two parties, agree on a heck of a lot more than they disagree on.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if there's... I very much suspect there won't be any pre-election deal, but there could be a post-election power sharing deal, depending on how the election goes. But never say never, because there's clearly some seats in this country where the Conservatives are trying to fight off the Lib Dems, and Reform wouldn't really stand a chance of winning, where if Reform took themselves out of the race, the Conservatives might retain those seats, and vice versa in places like the Red Wall, frankly, where I don't think the Conservatives stand a chance again. And the Labour Party, I hope, will be booted out. Talking about the Labour Party, on Tuesday evening, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer posed outside number 10 in front of a St George's flag, bunting, and alongside celebrities, including Ross Kemp, whom his staff had decided projected a sense of Englishness. Guests were served Melton Mowbray pork pies, Lancashire Eccles cakes, and Bakewell tarts. And the Prime Minister praised the value of modern patriotism. I mean, sorry while I just puke all down my top, That's what he does. He renders us into, after people like Emily Thornberry slag off our flag, after he called half the country far right, after he made what I thought was a diabolical statement about reclaiming the flag. He couldn't have "let's just celebrate Britain" without suggesting that there's a dark side to being, you know, in love with your own nation. And now he just does this tokenistic nonsense where you get a, you know, pork pie and grant from EastEnders.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's almost like he's gone to one of these not yet very advanced artificial intelligences and said, "Do me a kind of English thing, would you?" Yeah, again, I'm surprised that it's not. What else would it be? What other kind of very twee English things? Probably Paddington Bear would have to be there, and all these other things. Don't we love queuing? Isn't that nice? Ha ha ha. Let's have a cup of tea. Now, I like a cup of tea. I like queuing. I quite like the first Paddington movies, but it's so much deeper than that. And I think the inability of this modern Labour Party to understand Englishness, or Britishness, or Scottishness, or Welshness, or any of the rest of it, because Starmer himself has said that he would prefer to be in Davos than be in Westminster, the kind of sneering that they have, and these sort of idiots that go, "Actually, did you know St. George wasn't actually English, he was Turk," and all this sort of rot, right? Fundamentally, England is, and Scotland and Wales are distinct cultural, social, and often political units that stretch back as far as any other country, probably farther than every other one, with maybe the exception of the French, with our own sets of very, very distinct, deeply ingrained feelings that most people would think, actually, these are universal feelings. No, they're not. Our love of empiricism, our love of a kind of mercantile nature, wanting to set up our own businesses. When Napoleon said we were a nation of shopkeepers, it was meant as an insult, but it sounds like an absolutely wonderful description to me.
We're a nation of shopkeepers now, but most of those shopkeepers weren't born in Britain. That's my read on the situation. And if you wanted to see St. George's Day done badly, you should have seen what Sadiq Khan did in Trafalgar Square. It was a fright. James, thank you ever so much for joining me. The marvellous James Price, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a short break now so people can pay my wages, but I'm back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. It is the second hour, it's just gone 2 minutes past 8. I never do a time check, I don't know why I did it then, but there you go. I can do that more if you want me to. Remember, if you want to get involved with today's show, the number to call 03444 991,000. That's charged at your standard network rate. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp as well, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text message, but you have to write the word talk before you do the rest of the content. Let's have a little look at some of your messages now, and we're going to be taking your calls probably at 1:30. So if you want to chat to me, you can phone that number right now, register your interest, and you'll be vetted. And we run such a good service here, we even call you back. That's right, you can say, I'd love to speak to Alex about such and such. OK, we'll take your name, we'll take your number, and cometh the hour, cometh the call. Right, Alex, we can't have cloud seeding, says Sean in Norwich. They do it in Dubai, and they had apocalyptic flooding the other year. With the sorry state of our plumbing infrastructure, it's suicide. Well, we don't really need much encouragement to have apocalyptic flooding. Take that from somebody who was born and bred in Gloucester, famous for Dr. Foster and the puddle of rain. It is a city that very often goes underwater. But I don't know about you guys, right? I don't know anything about this, but I know people have been sort of, you know, talking on the sidelines about cloud seeding and stuff for a while, and I haven't actually taken the time to go down the wormhole. But my spidey senses say to me, don't go making Frankenstein clouds. Don't mess with nature to that extent. Because, you know, when you start fumbling around with a delicate balance of the stratosphere and that goes wrong, there'll be a pretty hefty price to pay. At least that is my hunch. Maybe it's all totally safe. It's going to change the world. It's going to help our farmers because we'll be able to determine when they should harvest and when they shouldn't. And I'm just being an old Luddite. Let me know what you think, by the way, if you know anything about this. Someone says, hi, Alex, they've been chemtrailing for years. That to me sounds like something that sounds like Heaven nightclub on a Saturday night in Soho. And the RAF conducted experiments that caused mass floodings in Cornwall and the surrounding areas, says somebody else. And Anne in Wales says, I'd rather £50 million went to asteroid protection and contingency planning for a major volcanic eruption. I mean, asteroid protection, I'm pretty sure we've now developed weapons, I think, that can, like, you know, crumble asteroids out of the sky. And there's one particular one which sort of lurks around and used to have a probability of 1 in 100,000 that it might strike Earth. And I think the probability has gone up. Seriously, I was reading this the other day because I read nerdy stuff. The probability of whatever it's called like asteroid 782500 Beta Max the Third or something like that. But apparently this thing, the probability of it now striking Earth is like 1,000 to 1. So there you go, inching closer to the apocalypse with every passing day, and we don't even need Ed Miliband's help. But when it comes to this major volcanic eruption, they're saying that there's been a few tremors and rumbles underneath Mount St Helens. If that thing blows, well, that's it. Half the blimmin' world is probably under a massive ash cloud, which will change our seasons and our weather patterns for centuries to come. You never know. We might all turn into Yetis and never live to see what happens next. So, yeah, that's my contextual view of the lot of it. Right, let's get on with the show and speak now to James Melville, social and political commentator and legend indeed. James, hello, my darling. How are you?
Hi, Alex, you well?
I'm very well. Before we get on to my sort of set pieces, do you know anything about cloud seeding and all of this stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of so-called tinfoil hat territory, and the so-called conspiracy theorists have been talking about it for a while, but actually there's a lot of evidence to say that it does suggest in some shape or form. I mean, you know, there's been tests in the Middle East and in America. You know, there was an investigation by the BBC and also The Guardian a few years ago to show that even back as 1952, the RAF were linked to some floods in Devon. So there is a lot of this around. And then obviously with the news of the last couple of days that the government are potentially investing up to 50 million to conduct experiments in this sort of thing. Well, I would suggest that this isn't the best use of taxpayers' money, considering we have cuts to the disabled in terms of their benefits. Also, farmers are being punished through inheritance tax, and also pensioners losing their winter fuel allowance. And yet we've got a government who claim that there's a £22 billion black hole, and they're effectively using taxpayers' money to the tune of 50 million on something like this, and also up to 30 billion on carbon capture schemes. So if we've got a black hole, I think they're just adding to it.
I mean, it's funny. One thing that Ralph Shorthammer said in the first hour, which really did make me chuckle, is it's so ironic that the government's trying to sort of put aerosols into clouds to reflect the sunlight at the same time as trying to buy a load of solar panels to absorb it. Which I was like, yeah, you make a good point there. Right, now, talking about solar panels makes me think of Ed Zero. He's now looking at zonal pricing, which critics say will create a postcode lottery when it comes to the cost of electricity for families up and down the country. I mean, basically, if you happen to live in a densely populated area in or around London, you know, no one, it's not exactly the people who live in London who work in London's fault, the fact that we've had open door immigration and, you know, 1 in 12 people in this city seem to be illegal. It doesn't seem fair that these people are then could potentially be forced to pay higher electricity rates as well. What's going on here? This seems to me mad when we have, in theory, a national grid. The Ed Miliband spent 8 billion or whatever it was of taxpayers' money setting up GB Energy. But when it comes to paying our bills, he wants to silo all of us in different parts of the country with different schedules.
Yeah, it's just more ridiculousness from a ridiculous government and a ridiculous individual in charge of a very important position within the government. You know, Miliband has been saying that the greatest risk to our energy security is climate change. But actually, I would suggest at the moment, the greatest risk to our energy security is actually Ed Miliband. If you look at this particular clown world policy where it becomes a postcode lottery about how much you're paying on energy bills, combined with plastering numerous mass-scale solar panels on prime farmland, often riding roughshod over local objections, and therefore putting some of our food security at risk, combined with effectively denying additional opportunities to provide old school energy. Remember oil and gas in the North Sea, and yet we're also importing billions of pounds worth of oil and gas from Norway, who share the North Sea with us. We also don't have enough storage facilities for gas, combined with carbon capture machines. What this is about is Ed Miliband appears to be drunk on power and on the altar of net zero. Now, we can laugh at Ed Miliband's harebrained schemes all we want, but there is a serious point to this. Britain is surrounded by natural resources, and we should not be having a conversation about energy security whatsoever, nor should we be completely reliant on importing energy when we're awash with traditional forms of energy. And yet, ultimately, we, the taxpayer, are paying a price for this. We're paying a price in terms of putting our taxes into some of these nonsense daft schemes, combined with the Labour government breaking one of their many pledges, saying that energy bills were going to come down. They haven't. They've gone the other way. They've gone north. The prices are getting higher. Well, so Miliband is doing Miliband things here, being drunk on power, but ultimately the serious point of this is questions need to be asked about whether net zero is sustainable. And I would say that it's time for a referendum on net zero. You know, give the public the choice, have a national debate about what do we want in terms of our economic and energy security. What does it look like? Let's open this up. And I'm a great believer in democracy, and I think it's time on an issue as big as this, let's have a referendum on net zero.
Well, that would be nice, but unfortunately, when it comes to democracy, no one was given a choice. No one actually said, we want to do the net zero thing. And I remember Boris Johnson was probably the biggest advocate for Britain saving the world and reversing climate change. And when he hosted COP, whatever it was, up in Scotland, he looked pleased as punch to be the big I am leading the way. And then get this. The Shadow Energy Secretary, Andrew Bowie, has said this about Ed Miliband's scheme. Obsession with net zero will push up bills further, risk rolling blackouts, make Britain more reliant on China. Until China heed our calls to abandon the mad dash to net zero, they'll only make families poorer. I'm sorry. Whose calls to abandon net zero? The Conservative Party's calls to abandon net zero. That seems to me to be a bit revisionist when it comes to recent political history.
Yeah, it is. It's just so much hypocrisy in all of this stuff. I mean, if you look at Ed Miliband's own personal carbon footprint, where he's jaunting around the world, going to the next global summit, doing the big I am about being the big chieftain of net zero, and yet telling us plebs to do our bit to save the planet. And ultimately, with net zero in the UK, what difference is it really going to make?
Right.
Total emissions is it's just under 1% for the UK, and yet somewhere like China accounts for more carbon emissions than the rest of the developed world put together. If you want to point the finger anywhere on emissions, let's look at China. But ultimately, what we're doing is putting our economic and energy security at huge risk with this, and at enormous cost to the taxpayer. And ultimately, the question needs to be asked: for what exactly?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, what we're doing is encouraging China to pump out more carbon into the atmosphere by asking them to make all of the solar panels using forced labour. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It is absolutely farcical. Let's talk now about the fact that disability benefits, the spending on disability benefits, is set to soar by 2030, and that is despite pretty big cuts. We've got a huge problem, don't we, with the workforce in the UK, particularly, I'd say, young people who seem to be on long-term sick for mental health reasons. When we're spending more than 20 billion, with almost 2 million extra claimants by the end of the decade, we've got to figure out a way to reverse that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. There's two sides of this. I mean, I'm a great believer, actually. We might have a different opinion on this, Alex. I'm a great believer that fundamentally our tax revenue should be used in one of the most important ways is protecting our vulnerable. You know, I think of in terms of the Labour government, they're punishing our vulnerable, you know, cuts to not just welfare for the disabled, but also carers that go with it, combined with the winter fuel allowance that's been removed for pensioners. I would suggest that, you know, they're taking away one of the key essentials in the social contract, you know, protecting the most vulnerable. But I do get the point that there is individuals within that are possibly trying it on in terms of receiving types of benefit. But if you're looking right now in terms of government cuts, with disabled budget cuts, they're saying that up to 200,000 extra people could be pushed into poverty on this. And yet, what we've got, going back to the previous story, we've got a government that's willing to spaff away 20 billion of public money on carbon capture machines. What we need in this country almost is a UK version of Doge, whereby there's some genuine auditing about where all our tax money is spent, not just on a national point of view, but also local government point of view. Look at the local authorities that are facing bankruptcy at the moment. And some of that is to do with government cuts, but other things are to do with wastage and government spend at all levels. And again, what we need, like so many different things, is a national conversation and a root and branch to really get to the bottom about where all our tax monies are being spent. Because at the moment, what's happening is we're getting almost ego-based fuel trip spends, what the Labour government are doing with things like carbon capture and net zero, versus punishing individuals and communities who need it most. And there's a lot of wastage. So this has been not just the Labour government, this goes on with previous governments as well, whereby what is happening with our tax monies? And are we, as a taxpayer, getting return on investment? And in many ways, we're not. We're not getting the bare essentials. You know, we've got potholes that aren't being fixed, constant roadworks, a dilapidated infrastructure and public services, and we're getting those who need it most not receiving the right benefits. It's time for our own version of Doge.
No, I fully agree with you on all of that. The one area that I think raises a big question mark for me is the fact that the biggest category of spending when it comes to personal independence payments is anxiety and depression. 3.4 billion spent on claimants with such conditions. Now, it's hard, isn't it? You know, you got mental health isn't like having a big open bleeding sore that you can point at and go, look, there's the evidence, I really have it. But certainly without a doubt, if you roll back the clock 30 years, you wouldn't be able to be paid by the government to not work because of anxiety, nor would I suggest depression. I believe in compassionate leave, of course I do. I also think there are plenty of people who probably do suffer burnout, and I think given how, you know, tedious and awful many people's jobs are, and the very slim recompense people get for actually doing it, I don't actually blame people who are fed up to the back teeth and don't want to go to work. But it cannot be sustainable that the biggest welfare payment is to people with anxiety and depression.
Yeah, but this becomes a bigger problem, an existential problem within what is society within the UK and the structures around that. You know, I would suggest that in many ways, Britain has been on the slide for 40, 50 years. And part of that is successive government failure to make sure that we have the infrastructures, public services, and community spirit right across the country. We've gone through effectively forms of deindustrialization for 40 years, and they've hollowed out so many communities. You know, there's great industrial towns in the central belt of Scotland and the industrial north of England, and they've lost their purpose. And so the knock-on effect of that is you have generations of individuals in those communities who feel hopeless. They haven't got a core future in their communities. We've got the death of the high street in many places as well. So people are looking around their own infrastructures and own communities going, where is the hope? So for me, the conversation goes even deeper than that. So it's very easy, I think, to say we need to be streamlining benefits and, you know, what about the mental health issue and should they get benefits? Actually, what we need to go is even further than that and look at why effectively misery rates in the UK are off the scale and increasing over the last 40 years. And that's because so many communities have lost hope, opportunity. There's no jobs, there's no prospects. There's a reliance on benefits in many cases. And so therefore you have to ask the question about what are we going to do to actually improve national confidence and national hope. And that starts, I think, with governments who genuinely take care of their own in those forgotten communities. What, do you remember the whole thing that Tories used to say about Northern Powerhouse?
Oh, yeah, levelling
Whatever
up.
happened?
Yeah.
Levelling up. It's just rhetoric.
Yeah.
What these communities want, they don't just want a little bit of money thrown in certain directions that isn't used in the right way. And again, that comes back to what's effective use of taxpayers' money. What they want is genuine industries to return to those areas and they can feel some hope and purpose again. That's the bigger picture discussion.
Sounding a bit like an Oxfam advert. People in Northumberland don't want to live on handouts. They want factories built that they can go and work in. But it's true. I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a sort of pervasive misery that's gripping the country. And it doesn't help when our politicians also keep talking us down and don't allow us to celebrate our nation because that would be racist. James, don't go anywhere. We're taking a short break now. When I come back, we're going to be talking about the number of crimes that have been going unsolved every single day. It is eye-watering. I'm back after this.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
So with this virtual non-existent army and the Ukrainians with volunteer units effectively fought the Russians to a standstill on the Eastern Front in Donbass. They simply were not capable of fighting a war on both fronts. There was nothing they could do about Crimea. But I can tell anybody listening to this, having lived among Ukrainians for 2 years and indeed worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government, that Crimea is
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, James, I've got a very personal question to ask you, if you wouldn't mind.
Fire away.
Have you ever nicked anything?
That's for me to know and you to find out. Well, yeah, I mean, it's, don't we all do that in some shape or form?
I don't know. I'm pure as the driven snow, me. I've never nicked a thing.
Of course you are.
I'm pretty sure if you open my cupboard, you'd find all sorts of branded pint glasses.
I think there was some sort of strange little racket that went on when I was at secondary school with Panini football stickers, that people were all going into shops doing it for a little bit of a dare to see if the odd packet could be stolen here or there. So I might have been part of that at some point many, many years ago. But I've obviously learnt the error of my ways.
But the thing is, though, this is going to be about shoplifting, as I'm sure you know. Shoplifting is now at an absolute record level. 516,971 shoplifting offences in 2024, a 20% increase on the year before. That's what, if the police have recorded it, that's the ones the police are actually bothering to turn up to and record, which is the tip of the iceberg. I don't know what it's like with you up in Scotland, but in London, where I live, the shops down the high street in my particular borough, half of them have one door boarded up because of the looting that's been taking place. The co-ops see fit to actually put their meat products in security tag protected transparent plastic boxes because the robbing has gotten so bad. Then at the same day you find out that 5,700 crimes are going unsolved every single day. This might not be, you know, stabbing and murders, but the point is it does indicate we live in a pretty broken society.
Yeah, I think it's a very good indicator. It's actually a serious point. I mean, I've seen it as well. You know, I've lived, in Scotland, I've lived in London, I've lived in Cornwall, and I've noticed the exact example you've said, both in Cornwall and Scotland, where I spend a lot of time going between the two places for family reasons, whereby a lot of foods are now effectively under wraps. They're locked up, particular things like meat and, alcohol. And I think it's indicative of, again, this ongoing cost of living crisis. We've had a cost of living crisis now since COVID. I think the cost of living crisis is a cost of high taxation crisis. It's a cost of, bad government policy crisis. It's also a cost of lockdowns crisis, which is an inconvenient truth for a lot of people, because you do not shut down an economy for 18 months and expect to get away with it. You end up having to print loads of money. It causes rampant inflation by devaluation. And then you've also got corporate greed thrown into it as well. Now, the inflation cycle that we've been in over the last few years is a slightly different cycle of inflation to normal cycles of high inflation, whereby it's an overheating economy. People are spending too much on luxury goods. What's happening in this one, it's the bare essentials that are going up. So food, fuel, energy, and so on. And yet the companies who are providing those are showing record profits. And meanwhile, again, everyone else is feeling the pinch. This is not something that's just affecting the really poor. It's affecting everyone.
But do you think that is the main reason behind this surge in shoplifting? Because I would put it down to two things, frankly speaking. One is now, in certain parts of the country, shoplifting is now being done by gangs, and it's being done to order, and it's being done professionally, particularly when you look at, the co-op and their meat in boxes. You see people going in, armfuls of steaks, luxury cheeses. They're even nicking luxury cheeses, putting in big orders and never paying them from people like Neil's Yard. And this stuff is being stolen to order and is being shipped over to Eastern Europe, where all the gangsters from Albania have set up luxury restaurants and need stuff to feed their clients. I think a lot of this is being done also to sell around the back of takeaways and Uber Eats and Deliveroos and all the rest of it. The people putting food in boxes for that. The provenance of their ingredients isn't necessarily lawful. And I also think we have a huge problem with the fact that at some point shops decided, the big sort of chain shops went, do you know what, we're going to have a load of errant stock going out the door. There are going to be people who nick a load of things because, you know, if they don't have to go through the till and there isn't that barrier, that they'll try their luck, essentially. But they decided they'd add more on to the cost of our groceries, or at least they're saving on the wages and the pensions of having staff. I think something went very terribly wrong when we decided that the cashier was surfeit to need.
I think that's actually a very good point. I think it's a combination of what I said and it's a combination of what you said. Some multiple reasons. But I think what we need is, I think, with, you know, it's almost, we're regressing, I think, in terms of our retail experience.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big believer, not everyone can do this. I'm a great believer in, you know, in bypassing the supermarket actually as much as possible and going to find your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker in your local communities. But not everyone can do that. I'm aware of that. There needs to be more opportunity for them, but also there needs to be more face-to-face transactional experiences rather than what's happening now, where there's a lack of staff in many places, because again, corporations are trying to lower their costs, but effectively it means it's not a particularly pleasant experience for the shopper, but there's also more opportunity for security concerns as well. So again, I think from a retail point of view, we've got so many problems there. We've got online shopping, we've got the death of the high street, we've got shops that aren't necessarily, especially the supermarkets, particularly pleasant experiences, combined also with the point that I mentioned about a cost of living crisis where people are really struggling to make ends meet and they're struggling to buy basic essentials, including food. So again, it's yet another example of, I do feel in so many different ways, not just from retail, but also the things we talked about previously with energy and also food supply, we're regressing. Something has gone really horribly wrong on so many different levels in this country, which has been exaggerated, I think, since the COVID era. And it doesn't take much to work out why that is.
I couldn't agree more, James. You're absolutely right. When they decided they wanted to lock us all in our houses, there are plenty of people who never wanted to come back out again. They de-socialized us, for want of a better phrase. And I think it's pretty appalling. I think the more we can encourage people to go to the grocery stop, chat to the local cashier, the better mental health will be, the more employment we'll have, the more cohesive our communities will be, because that is the stuff of being a human. James, thank you ever so much. The magnificent James Melville, ladies and gentlemen. Right, after the break, it is the much vaunted section where you get to have your say. So this is the last chance in this hour to register your interest in being patched through to the studio. The number to call is 0344 499 1000. Dial that and hopefully have a chinwag with me. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp message too, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. Remember, you have to write the word talk before you text. Right, time to put the kettle on, but don't go anywhere because I'll be back in just a jiffy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, you delicious things. It's your opportunity to talk to me. So the number is 03444 991000 if you'd like to have a chinwag. I'm going to read some of your messages now, and then I have Mary in Cyprus waiting. But hold on for one moment, Mary. Let's rattle through some of these texts. Malcolm in Hampshire says, thanks for the show, Alex. Oh, my pleasure. Ed Miliband, a quote. He may look like an idiot and talk like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot. Apparently that's a Groucho Marx quote. Margaret Thatcher was correct again when she said those in the civil service will hold on to their jobs to the detriment of the people if allowed to take control. She was an extremely astute lady, says Cherie in Leicester. She was indeed. If only we could resurrect her. Where are all these visa holders going to live, asks Sue, assuming she's talking about the EU Youth Mobility Scheme. Will they be returning home for their medical treatment since there isn't enough to serve the resident population? Yeah, I wouldn't blame them if they did. They probably won't be able to go see a doctor here anyway. Hi, Alex. Ed Miliband single-handedly has made me now a disbeliever in climate change. And to add to this, several of my friends think the same. In addition, I do not know a single person who has any respect for him and his ideology. And Shane says climate change is just another excuse to exert controlling measures on the general public and take more money from the working class, and again controlling measures to keep the classes divided. That's Shane in Caerphilly. It does feel like, you know, the government just sits there rather than deal with the problems that we desperately need dealt with right in front of our very eyes. Bin collections, potholes, worklessness. Instead, they're like, yeah, let's save the world. Yeah, the UK's got to lead the way on the globe. We don't have to lead the way on the global stage. This comes from the same people who talk us down given any other opportunity. Oh no, don't wave a cross of St George. That's waythist. But you must lead the way on climate change. You can't have it both ways, my friends. Right, let's speak now to Mary, who is in Cyprus. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Alex, or Kalispera, where I am.
Lucky you. I bet you're lovely and toasty and you've been basking in sunshine all day.
Well, no, it's only been about 19 degrees.
Oh, well, only 19. I don't know how you survive it, Mary.
Anyway, what I wanted to say was that sitting here as an expat, watching my birth country go down the drain, I just wanted to say that it does show that with all the people on the front bench and the awful Prime Minister, plus that stupid man, Miliband, it just goes to prove that whatever sort of degree you have got doesn't stop you from being an idiot.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think most people with degrees are idiots, quite frankly, Mary. Most people come out after being on the conveyor belt of modern-day university thinking Hamas are heroes, climate change is going to kill us tomorrow, Greta Thunberg, some sort of oracle being sent to us by a divine overlord who also believes that we should all have pronouns. So I wouldn't trust our education system one bit. Mary, what's it like over in Cyprus if you wanted to get a doctor's appointment?
Well, if I ring up tomorrow, I could probably get one later in the day.
Wow. That seems like a miracle to we Brits stuck back on this island. And what about the migration? Have you got a migration crisis over there? Do you have people turning up on boats and the like?
Yes. I read somewhere that last year Cyprus sent back nearly 11,000, which makes me wonder why Britain can't do the same. But, yeah, there are boats that go out and send them back.
Wow. This is what I'm talking about. It is possible to do. You know, there are actually boats from Greece that go out and turn boats around in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's something that Giorgia Meloni wanted to do in the Mediterranean, send people back to Tunisia. And I just think that is surely the easiest way of doing things. Mary, thank you ever so much. Wonderful to get a phone call from Cyprus. Although I would say this, if you look on the map, because if you know, I sort of, where's Cyprus? Oh, it's right next to Gaza, though, isn't it? A bit of ocean between the two, though. Right. Let's speak to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Hi there, Mark.
Hi there, Alex.
Hello, my darling. What do you want to talk about?
Hope you're keeping well. Yeah, basically a couple of things really, if I can. Firstly, what I actually called about was the blotting out the sun.
Oh, right, yeah, this mad sort of putting aerosol in the air and, you know, putting salt in clouds and things.
All that stuff. Just absolute insanity. My own personal belief of this is, you know, I'm getting really fed up with scientists that seem to believe that they are somehow some form of God. You know, they can play with these kind of things and, everything will be just fine. So we've tried it in a lab and it was just great. You know, they literally make us the guinea pigs without permission. I don't personally believe it's the right of any government in whatever country to be doing crazy things like blocking out the sun, to be adding, you know, certain things into the feed of cattle, you know, just for the net goal of some illusionary climate change nonsense. I mean, the reality is with Britain, particularly with the UK, we have one of the lowest amounts of sunshine in the entire world. You know, we get about an average of about, I think it's around 1,400 hours a year. I mean, the only countries that get less sunlight than us are literally in the Arctic Circle. You know, and these clowns are talking about blotting out sunlight, dimming the sun down. I mean, we all know that will have, without being a scientist, I can tell you right now, the instant effect that will have is people will become a little bit more miserable.
See, what I don't like, right? Because look, I love science. I am all for innovation, experimentation, and Britain has for a long time been a world leader in science. I've said this a number of times in this show. It was Charles Babbage who invented the first computer. It was the UK, his name's just escaped me, but it'll come to me if I think hard enough, who came up with the concept of the internet. In Berkeley, it was, I've lost all my names today, something's gone wrong. It was what's his name? Edward Jenner, there we go, who came up with the very first vaccine. Britain, it's brought you the steam train, it's brought you the telephone, the television. We are phenomenal at science, and I love science, and I love innovation, and I think it's just so important that we maintain that. But, and here comes the but, like you said, I don't believe in feeding cows antacids to stop them farting. I'm kind of uncomfortable when it comes to a product that at the end the humans are going to be consuming. I would rather nature is left to its own devices, because what we've seen right now in man's meddling in things like the food chain, we had BSE, didn't we? When everyone decided cows can munch away on sheep's brains. Yeah. And we're seeing, you know, strange upticks in diseases from autisms to cancers. And a lot of people are pointing at things like seed oils, which are a byproduct of industries such as cotton, which really aren't fit for human consumption, and yet are sort of filling all the vegan sausages in Iceland. And then you look at this and it's like, okay, the whole of life hinges on the sun. If we didn't have the distance between Earth and Sun that we do, and the protective layer of the stratosphere around us, there would have been no life on Earth. We'd all be dead. And so when people start messing about with that, even in a small way, even incrementally, I kind of think, uh-oh, here we go. This is now tampering directly with the rhythms of nature. And that's when I get freaked out, if I'm honest with you. That's when I kind of start thinking that playing God is not a good idea. Mark, thank you for your call, my love. Right, let's speak to Graham, who's in Kent. Hi there, Graham.
Hello, Alex. You're a beautiful lady, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Now, let me say to you that I'm pretty fed up, and you over the last few nights we've been talking about why people are attracted to reform, and I'm looking at the Conservative Party, and I'm thinking to myself, when you look at things like Prime Minister's Question Time, there's no democracy in this country now. Starmer makes a couple of pathetic jokes. He turns around and he doesn't answer questions. You know, the guy at I've forgotten his name now, that Kev has a go at, Lindsay Hoyle.
I was going to say, that doesn't narrow it down, does it? The guy who Kev has a go at, that could be any human on this planet.
Yeah, well, Lindsay Hoyle he has a go at. He doesn't really conduct it properly. He allows Starmer to get away. And this is reflected in the rest of the... because all our standards are dropping. I've lived through, you know, Callaghan governance and Wilson and things like that. And there was a basic standard, even though some of it was pretty awful, but there was a basic standard, but I'm not seeing this today.
Do you get the impression, because this is what I feel, when I look round at the Labour cabinet and most of the people on those green benches, they're just really rubbish, aren't they? They're absolute dreck.
And I want to give Kemi Badenoch a little. Now, I've done a lot of negotiations in the City of London and across the country. And what you've got to do is you've got to know the person you're negotiating against. And I've picked up with Starmer, right back when he was questioned in the last couple of shows before, with the last Prime Minister. He couldn't answer questions on the spot when he was given difficult questions.
Well, he can't now, can he, still?
Well, he doesn't. And the other thing is he doesn't like criticism. So what I'd say to Badenoch is, yeah, she did all right the other day. I wasn't as overbearing as other people have been about it. It was a subject she knew.
Well, it was her wheelhouse, wasn't it? The culture wars stuff.
Yeah, she's got to get more aggressive with him. She should be driving a coach and horses through all this ridiculous stuff. I mean, she really should be. The net zero, shipping in coke from Japan when we've got a colliery down the road.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? First of all, they're running off to China every 5 seconds to say, please, can you give us all our solar panels? Can you give us all of our wind turbines, which are made from, I don't know, stuff like steel, probably. And then at the same time, they allow the Chinese to buy and mine, and then the Chinese run it into the ground and don't want to keep it open because all of the net zero policies make it unaffordable. Then they go, we're going to renationalise it just after they've closed down the only final metallurgical coal mine in the whole country, which is needed to make steel.
Yeah, the coke. And the thing about it, it's all basic stuff.
Yeah.
Now, to my mind, I've voted Conservative in the past, but Badenoch's not doing a good enough job.
She not.
Generic, is he going to be as aggressive? You've got to be aggressive with Starmer. You've got to put him on the back foot because he can't think on his feet.
Well, he was really laming. He was really laming Prime Minister's questions, wasn't he? Because Badenoch had said, here he is again. He can't say whether a woman has a penis or not. La 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 la. And he looked a bit uncomfortable. And he just stood up and went, oh, that probably sounded better when she said it to herself in the mirror earlier.
Yeah,
and looked around for approval. It was like,
and
what?
He's getting away with all that. And the thing about it is, we do go back to those last 2 debates with Sunak, when Sunak started asking questions of him, and the media that's been captured by the mainstream media, captured by the left, protected him. And he protected him. Oh, no, it's not your chance to ask a question and all this. And the guy did his Biden face. He looked in, oh, it's unfair. This is unfair. And Badenoch's got to get hold of this guy because he is creating tremendous problems in the future in the country.
Well,
tremendous problems.
She hasn't been in post for long, only since November, I guess. Maybe she still needs a bit more of opportunity to get fully warmed up. I don't know, Graham. I don't know if she's got it in her. Thank you for the call, though. Right, we're going to take a short advert break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be catching up with the wonderful Candice Holdsworth. We're going to be talking about whether children should be facing social media bans and also whether we should be fining £1,000 for people who, the ones they're playing their music really loud on buses and trains. I hate that. Yeah, £1,000 not enough. That's coming up after this.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
So with this virtual non-existent army and the Ukrainians with volunteer units effectively fought the Russians to a standstill on the Eastern Front in Donbass, they simply were not capable of fighting a war on both fronts. There was nothing they could do about Crimea. But I can tell anybody listening to this, having lived among Ukrainians for 2 years and indeed worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government, that Crimea is absolutely
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, I don't know how many of my listeners happen to live in London and subject themselves to the misery of TfL on a regular basis. To be honest, most of the time in London, nobody speaks at all. The weirdest thing, I noticed it the other day, I became very aware of it when I was getting the tube to London Bridge where Talk Towers are. And I was on the Jubilee line at Westminster, where you sort of change from one platform to the next if you're coming from West London, as I do. And as I was going down the conveyor belts in the morning, and it was just throngs and throngs of people, what I noticed is no one says anything. You could actually hear a pin drop. It's that Antisocial in London. It was like some sort of strange Chinese workers camp where everyone's just silently walking. That's it, just silently walking and glaring at each other because they're so tightly packed in. And yet then you get on a certain bus or a certain tube at a certain time of night and there's always some oik either sharing his hip-hop grime stabby music at 1,000 decibels, which no one asked for, or worse still, right, something which foreigners seem to do that I've never seen a British person do this, ever. But every time I see someone do this, it's always a man, and it's always a man from a country that discernibly isn't Britain, having a phone call on loudspeaker with the phone held towards their chin, shouting into it as someone shouts back. And I'm like, why can't you put that thing to your ear? What is wrong with you? Anyway, playing loud music on trains should be illegal. That is according to the Liberal Democrats. They want to see offenders fined up to £1,000 under the plans, which have also been backed by the Conservatives. I want to speak to Candice Holdsworth about this. Candice, your thoughts, because I don't like antisocial behaviour. I don't like oiks playing loud music on trains, putting their feet on seats and all the rest of it. My only fear is, having moaned about all of this, that these things end up a thin end of the wedge, don't they? Where all of a sudden it starts off with the oiks playing the loud music and then noise pollution becomes all manner of other things that jobs-worth conductors will decide they're going to come over and issue you penalty notices for.
Yeah, but then there'll be the stocks next for, people who cycle on pavements. So I think any party who gets behind that would win in a landslide.
Yes.
Like, Ed Davey from the Lib Dems, he would never need to campaign again. He could just go on water slides and pratfalls. It would bring out the silent majority. Prison sentences for playing music loudly on trains, and the stocks for people who ride their bikes on pavements.
Yeah, line bikes, just looking at a line bike should get you imprisoned as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But no, we have had this huge uptick in antisocial behaviour, and I think most of the time, there's one thing if there's a group of people sitting there having fun. You often get it if you're on a train and it's, a train that ends up going to a race course and there might be some old football match or something, and there might be a group of lads all sitting there laughing, their cans are carling or whatever, playing each other videos. It doesn't bother me, actually. I just think, yeah, whatever. Humans need to talk and have fun. And, most Brits are a bit tentative when it comes to doing that. But the people who this concerns are the people who do it in a provocative manner. And we all know who they are, who deliberately play music loud to signal their presence. They're usually the same kids who have their hoods all the way up and a COVID mask on and look pretty threatening. But the problem is with our two-tier system, they're probably not the ones that the police are going to go after anyway, because the police are largely told if it's a small peccadillo of an incident and someone's from a minority, you best not get involved.
I know, and people are so hesitant to do it because they know if they do, they'll just get a stream of invective directed at them or something worse. But I do think this is a serious issue, and I've noticed people talking about it more and more and more, how much they hate taking the bus or the train because there's always people playing loud music or having loud conversations. And I think it's a pity that we might have to take more sort of heavy-handed means to stop people doing it. But I think there's just been a breakdown in order in public space. I just don't think people respect public space as much as they used to. And it's something that's shared between all of us. And I feel like people sometimes have their nerves on edge when they're traveling because there's always something very irritating, and music played through a tinny speaker like that is the most irritating thing in the world. It's not just the sound, it's also because that person is being rude to you and you know it and they know it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly my point. But this is what I'm saying. In somewhere like London, the usual suspects won't even have a policeman look in their direction if they did that, because I see it all the time at stations, people pushing through the barriers, fare dodgers, and they stroll past pigeon-chested by all the high-vis people who are supposed to be making sure no one does it. And if I dared do that as a wee little English girl, they would pull me over to the side and say, "Madam, you haven't paid your ticket." So the problem with this, it sounds great, but those who are going to enforce it are probably not up to the job. Talking about people supposed to be enforcing things not up to the job, today, in theory, Ofcom's saying under the Online Safety Act that essentially online platforms need to make sure that they are age-proofed, that they either have a separate section for children or they have age barriers, including kids having to use photo ID to prove their age, or, you know, facial scanning or things like that. And then also making sure that when young kids are online, they're not being bombarded with smut and adverts for drugs and hookers. I support all of this. But would you support children also facing a social media curfew? Because these are plans also being considered by the government due to how addictive it is.
See, I'm a bit torn on that because I have young kids and I've sort of seen what's happened to the generation before. Sadly, they've been the guinea pigs, and I think that there's a lot of negative stuff we've learned. So I think me and people with kids my age, my eldest is 6, my youngest is 1, I think we're going to be a lot more cautious about social media. The only thing I would say is I don't like the state or the government playing the role of parent. I really, really, really don't like that. I mean, you've seen that with this Labour government and their free breakfast scheme, for instance, where they give kids a bowl of cereal and toast, something most parents are more than capable of giving their children. And if they aren't, then they need looking into. They really do. I think that the social media companies make these products to be really incredibly addictive, and I think parents are up against that. And so I am not against, even though I'm generally all for freedom and liberty, I'm not against some constraints being placed on it. I think maybe curfew should be up to parents. That's what parents need to decide to do. But I would raise the age limit of being able to use social media to age 16. I think we've seen a lot of evidence. I think we have a lot of evidence that it does harm to young people whose brains are developing. You know, there's recent data that came out that showed how few hobbies kids have these days. You know, they're not learning things like, they're not learning music, they're not doing extracurriculars because all their attention is just online. So it is a real negative. There are some positives, but I think up until age 16, that's where I put the limit.
Yeah, do you know what? It is funny, and I think we are waking up to the dangers of social media. And I was saying to someone just today, actually, when you look at all the sort of trans activists and the pro-Hamas lot marching on the streets, who tend to be of a certain age cohort, not exclusively, but I'd say the bulk of them are made up of people in their late teens, early to mid-20s. They've gone wrong. They're like, they've defaulted. They're odd. When I was in my sort of, you know, teens and 20s, the oddballs were like friendly goths and stuff. They might sort of dress a bit like Marilyn Manson, but they were sort of nice individuals who came and worked with you. You know, they just had funny clothes, basically, and liked candles and things like that. But now, the oddballs in society are actually mentally unhinged. They're depressed, they're alarmist, they're nasty, they're full of vengeful feelings and thoughts, they're lazy, they're detached, they're filled with hatred towards their country. And the problem I have with social media is actually, you know, you were saying, do you really want, you know, the states to take control of private enterprise or whatever it is? I'm more concerned about sandal-wearing tech bros in San Francisco essentially taking over the role of the state, because it's platforms like Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok which have been bombarding young people constantly with propaganda saying, oh, you might be in the wrong body, oh, you can get top surgery. It's equally platforms like TikTok, which are constantly being used by people traffickers, advertising, get on my boat across the channel. It's platforms like Instagram, which can easily be used to sort of, you know, search a particular emoji and find the man in your area who wants to sell you a wrap of cocaine or some cannabis gummies. I mean, I've got an Instagram account, which I never use, frankly. It's not my platform. I can't be bothered taking selfies. I'm 41 years old, for crying out loud. That is just not my jam. I do it every now and then on Twitter. But I've got Instagram, which I never go on to. Every now and then I look in my messages, and I'm amazed how many messages I am sent by people called, like, you know, Ruby Lily, saying, do you want to join my, you know, hot and heated party? And I'm going to do all these vile things with my vagina. And I'm like, how did this get in my inbox? And this is what I don't like, you know. I remember someone once saying, it might have been, what's her name, Coates, who was that Tory MP, but Miriam
Cates?
That's it, Miriam Cates, saying that the problem with social media is a bit like walking down a high street where you've got a shop selling drugs here, a big sign saying free sex here, people, you know, nicking from you. You know, it's the Wild West.
Yeah, and I think as well, you know, we're sort of naive about it. And I think, you know, people who are just older than us, who have older children, are also naive about it, because the internet we grew up on was so different. And I think you're right. We shouldn't be naive about these big tech companies. You know, I mean, they don't have the best interests of parents and children at heart. In fact, I don't think they even think about it at all. I think all the research into this has shown that sometimes they were aware of things, but, you know, didn't really deal with it because it affected their bottom line. And we know that it's affected young girls in particular. You know, I mean, for instance, you know, they're seeing more and more young girls with highly unrealistic body standards because they've grown up on Instagram, you know, with people using all these filters, and they have no idea what the true spectrum of beauty is. I mean, it's a huge problem. But I think also the reason why kids get so drawn into these spaces online, and it sort of feeds their identity, is because, you know, they're not really allowed to go out and experience the world. We do know that from parenting. We know that parents prefer to have their kids at home safe, in their rooms, on their computers. So that's how they're conducting their social lives. But actually, it was so much better if they got out into the world. I mean, like you say, with goths, most parents knew that their kids would grow out of being a goth. But I don't think it's like that now. I think it's totally different.
I think it is very different. It's not fads and it's not fashions. It's actually rewiring plastic minds. Candice Holdsworth, is fantastic catching up with you, my darling. Right, let's take another advert break before we herald in the final hour of the show. And a special hour it's going to be indeed, because I've seen him through the glass. Mr. Peter Barnes is waiting just outside. I can't wait to grab that scrawny little creature and drag him into the hot seat. I'll see you after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. He's here. We dragged him in by his lug hole through the door and we've plonked him in the corner just there. It's the wonderful Peter Barnes.
Hi, Alex. How's it going?
Very well,
yeah,
very
been a while,
well.
hasn't it?
Well, sort of
person to person anyway, yeah.
I'm surprised you dare to sit with me in this
slightly
studio.
terrified. That's why there's a desk between us.
Yeah, I know. Well, before there was just a sort of remote camera between us because we were just discussing in the break how there's this clip that's been going viral where I've lost my rag presenting. Was it sometime this week?
Yeah, it was Monday.
Was it Monday? It all blends into one with me. But I'd lost my rag about this Labour MP had gone over to... Was he a Labour or
no,
one of the pro-Gaza
ones?
One of the Gaza ones. He wants the airport in Kashmir.
Mohammed Iqbal.
Just for Pakistan to blow up, frankly, because that's all that will happen if there's an airport in Kashmir. It would just become like a bomb site. But he wants an airport there so his constituents can easily get to, you know, see their rallies or whatever. And then he was doing some sort of conversation, some event in Pakistan where he said the grooming gangs were all just far-right conspiracy theory. And I lost my rag in a big way at this and sort of let loose on air. But the thing is, at the time, it was a split screen and you were on the other side and it looked like I was dressing you down.
Yeah, literally, so many people have sent it to me saying, like, why is she calling you a demon? I was like, it's not me. There is an entire context to this conversation because what was really funny is you lost your rag and then I just kind of lost my rag as well because it was just one of those cathartic moments of just let it all out and then, oh yeah, we're on TV.
We went Easter mad, didn't we?
We really did, but I think it was very well justified. It was some of the things that we were talking about and just this stream of gaslighting that we had to call out. It was just, if we don't say it now, then our heads are going to explode with it. Yeah.
I loved it when we had our Saturdays together.
Me too. It was so much fun. It was chaos, but it was fun.
It was basically like setting up a pop-up asylum in the studio and just going a bit mad. Like someone sent me a present.
Ooh.
I know, every now and then there's a sort of area at the back of the newsroom there where there's a stash of envelopes and stuff. And every now and then I get stuff. I got a T-shirt the other day. So Jodie's just come in and given me this and it's like, here you go. Was it Jodie or was it?
Fraser.
Fraser. Sorry, love. I wasn't really looking. I was looking at. Blimey, this has been mummified.
Oh, I love that, Ray.
I want to get into it.
It's either been mummified, it's been wrapped well, or it's been wrapped by a mother.
Here we go. It's a book. Oh, the T-shirt didn't come with a letter. This one's got a letter. Here we go. Please accept this complimentary copy of my book, Losing Your Country. Oh, I'm losing my country, man. The book has a QR code that will take you to the accompanying website. That's from Berwyn Williams. Berwyn, thanks. Hey, that's a cool look. Remotely illustrated with over 50 informative videos. Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It's a bit like in Carter or something. Yeah. It's like, suppose it doesn't have like a disc on the inside leaf here. But when I said remotely illustrated, I was looking at the illustration on the front, which is a spectacle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that looks good.
There you go. So here you are. If you want to send me presents, so they are very well received. This will go on my bookshelf thanks to Berwyn Williams. Berwyn, mate, I just want to point something out though, love. On your letter you sent me, you're Berwyn with a Y. On your book, you're Berwyn with an I. So someone's done a typo, just FYI. That's lovely, a nice hardback one as well.
Yeah, I always buy hardback books.
Proper stuff. Berwyn, thank you ever so much. No, in all honesty, I really do love it when I get little gifts.
Yeah,
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? I think that's really lovely. Right, now... Talking about little gifts, apparently, if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, he's going to gift the nation a Minister for Deportations. What do you make of it?
Does it come with a receipt so we can give it back? Because this is the best U-turn I've ever seen in my entire life. Talk about screeching. You can hear this one right round the country. Let's not forget that not too long ago, Nigel Farage got up in front of a crowd and said that it was not politically viable for deportations. And now, suddenly, we're getting a minister for it? What has been the material difference between between then and now, I'll tell you what it is. It's because elections are around the corner and Nigel Farage wants to tell you something because he wants to be in the headlines again. This is absolutely staggering to me because there is already a minister in charge of deportations. Her name is Angela Eagles. And that's again, she already exists.
She's more worried about the trans thing, old Ange,
yeah,
isn't
but
she?
she's the Minister for State in charge of border security. This falls in her remit. This position already exists.
Yeah, but she ain't in the
So that's fine. You can say that she's not doing the job well enough. But what Nigel has got up in front of a camera and announced something that already exists. If he wants to change it, fine. That's not what he's announced today. This is a screeching U-turn yet again by Reform because there is no substance and no plan and nothing. This is absolutely staggering to me that he's got up and done this because it is just foolish in my opinion. Do not get me wrong. I think he's right in principle that we need to really kickstart this because the real question to ask is how does this country only have 24 rights of returns with other countries? We've only got 24.
24? And how many? Not 178
170 odd.
We don't know. We're just 100
over 150.
Almost 200.
But yet we only have 24. And none of them are actually guaranteed. It's all to do with diplomatic relations. So that's the real question to ask. And also in this announcement, he goes on to kind of downplay people who stay on student visas. Well, I hate to break it to you, that is the significant increase that we need to actually tackle more than the small boats because the people overstaying is the bigger problem than actually the small boats is.
And doing their Mickey Mouse courses, fake news universities.
We haven't actually recorded people who have overstayed on these visas since 2020. We don't keep the number.
What?
Exactly.
So you can come to Britain and be like, I'm going to study pep-poor mathematics at the University of Gra. And then doesn't exist. You come over here, you're doing Lord knows what, then you probably claim asylum or something.
Yeah. And yet we do not count the number of people that overstay. The last time we did, it accounted to about 91,000 people, and that was in 2019 to 2020. And this is the point, is that it is not just the small boats that we have to tackle. This is a whole issue.
We always stop counting things when we really ought. You know, it gets to the point where well, this is really dark now. Yeah, so when the figures have disappeared, you know that they're bad.
Exactly.
But look, I've got to defend Nigel. I've got to defend Nigel because look, I know the man well. I've been his right-hand woman in a previous life. Not in that way, not his wife or something, but you know, he's a strategist, advisor, a media human bag carrier, basically, for want of a better phrase. And I think he's come under a lot of unfair criticism for this because what he had actually said in a nuanced way is he does want to see deportations, but he was actually sort of pushing back on some of the things that other people were trying to, I think, cajole him into saying, or other people might have been saying, which is going as far as deporting, you know, almost entire families. You know, someone who's committed a crime and or the family and this and that and he's basically saying, well, look, it's just not practicable. I do think that he's always been very clear about wanting to deport people who are here illegally, because I've known that man his whole life. That's his politics. So I just wanted to sort of balance it with that. But I do agree that there is something. What has happened is he's come under a lot of fire with people going, bring back Nigel Farage. Where have you gone, lads? You've gone a bit soft. You've gone a bit funny.
This is a big criticism. You hear a lot from the right at the moment. Yeah.
Right, but he's heard it, right? Because he's clearly doing what people are telling him that he needs to do, which is get his mojo back, lead from the front, be the vanguard, be the first to say it, put his head above the parapet and have the courage that has gotten him this far.
I don't disagree with that, but what I will say, again, to be the anti-Nigel Farage guy in the room, is that that's fine, but when does a person stop becoming illegal and then start being, well, we can't deport them? I need some kind of parameters.
Where's the clarity?
Yeah, where's the clarity? The one thing that Reform have yet to provide is what comes after you've blown everything up. It's really easy to run around Westminster and say, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, that's gone, boom, gone, everything's amazing. What comes after? I'm more interested in people that want to build, not people that want to destroy. And all I'm seeing from people like Nigel and people like Lee Anderson and all these people, even Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, to a degree.
Ben's gone mad,
He always has been, and yet nobody's ever noticed it.
He'll probably sue me for that now.
You've got to start telling me what comes next. What is the next chapter? What does it look like? Give me a vision. Because the only thing Reform are building is a coalition of, I don't like that.
Well, you say that,
but they're not going to get anywhere, realistically. And I can't wait for them to get to government for that to become apparent.
While people were attacking Nigel for not talking enough about immigration, he had taken a bit of a break to talk about his policies for reindustrialisation. So, you know, mind you, look, what I'd say about this, and I'd use the same defence right now for the Conservatives as I would for Reform, which is we are 4 years out from a general election. We don't need to start publishing our manifestos yet. We do need to know where we stand politically and have a point of view. I think that's fine. And actually looking at the sort of remodelling of, you know, the Tories 2.0, where they had the audacity, the Shadow Energy Minister, who said to Ed Miliband, you need to heed our warnings about net zero. This is good. And I'm like, you guys invented that stuff. Like, come on.
Yeah, they rebranded the entire energy department Net Zero.
They rebranded the department. Was Sir Net Zero? It's like, don't want net zero. We've been always saying net zero's bad. It's like, no, you didn't.
You literally wrote it on the side of the building.
You had a massive conference in Scotland for it, you absolute looney tune. Like, yeah, exactly. It was a letterhead.
Yeah, it's a letterhead. Once it's a letterhead, it's a thing. But I agree with you that, you know, we are definitely... We've missed the window for Starmer to go anywhere now, so we've got to start preparing for the general election in the future. But my thing is, Reform are making a lot of noise, but they're not backing it up.
Well, they're going to have to, though, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're going to have to. And the longer they leave it, I think the more this kind of, well, what are you going to do, Nigel? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's got to start pulling him in lots of different directions, because the coalition that Reform is building is built on, I don't like that, not I'm in favour of this.
Although
that's
I do
a very dangerous place for a movement.
I feel like I've got to come out and do a word of support, which was before the snap election, which was under a year ago, basically, there wasn't really such a thing as Reform. I mean, it existed, right? It had a name, it had a logo, it had a leader and a deputy leader, but that was it. That was it. And then since the snap election was called and Nigel came back, it's having to build very quickly from the bottom up. And I think it has now got a policy unit. I think I've even heard talk that it's having a sort of associated think tank to sort of do all the research and start writing up policy. So that is sort of a proper growing up of a Farage entity, because UKIP didn't have a think tank. Brexit Party didn't have a think tank. So I think he is approaching this in I've got my eyes on number 10 and I'm now in the big league and I've got to do things properly. But you're right, you know, the proof of the pudding's in the eating.
If you're going to run around saying you're going to be the next Prime Minister, I'd rather like to know what you're going to do. And I think the level of expectation management coming out of Reform at the moment is non-existent. You know, you've got people talking about the great shake-up, the great demise of this and all the rest of it. You've got to start controlling that, because if you don't, your messaging is going to be all over the place. And then when you get to the general election, you start promising very little. People are going to be going, well, wait a minute, you said you were going to do this. Where's the policy for it?
Well, also, I think the bigger concern is if you've promised all this stuff, you find yourself in number 10, then you get a load of civil servants going, well, you can't do it because of this. Well, you can't do that because of this. Well, actually, because of this treaty. Well, the High Court's going to overturn that. The Supreme Court's going to overturn that. The ECHR will overturn that. You don't have enough numbers to get through a vote to leave the ECHR. And you end up tied up in the same sort of virulent knotweed as all your predecessors. And that is one of the big problems with the sort of Gordian knot of bureaucracy and nonsense that is this country.
But he's got 4 years now to plan that out.
Got to get planning.
You've got to get planning.
Making plans for Nigel.
Yeah, I know. But for anybody who is in government, you've got 4 years now. Get your act together, get your plans in place, and get them costed for God's sake.
We had the reverse problem with Labour. We didn't hear a peep out of what they wanted to do, did we?
No, nobody wanted to ask.
We didn't know about GB Energy or the cloud seeding and the 22 billion black hole that became 49 billion. We didn't know about the taxing the farmers and turning their fields into solar farms.
And that's because we never asked the most important question, is how are you going to do this stuff? We keep saying, well, what are you going to do for me? That's wonderful. But the most important question is how. Like you said, our bureaucracy is expansive and very powerful. So how are you going to get over it? How are you going to start challenging that? How are you going to bring that down? You know, we've got to start asking better questions and demanding better answers. And that's the only way our politics is ever going to change. Because we sit here day after day, week after week, saying the same thing, that this is going to stop you, that's going to stop you. Well, how are we going to get over that hurdle?
Oh, you know, I love playing the game when I'm lying in bed at night. So here's the thing, you know, I don't know, this is my little asleep tip for listeners, okay? Because everyone struggles with sleep, right? Well, actually, there are some holes out there who don't.
Oh,
Their
I don't
head
trust
hits
those
the pillow.
people.
Yeah, there's something wrong with them. They must be
yeah.
sociopathic if they're not tossing and turning and scratching and itching and too hot and turning the pillow over and waking up at 2 in the morning and thinking, oh, well, I'll go downstairs and make a cup of tea because I'm never going to sleep until about 6 anyway, when it's the Today programme that makes me nod back off.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But anyway, here's my sleep tip for listeners, right? When I can't sleep, And clearly, after sort of explaining my 2 a.m. cup of tea, it doesn't work, but never mind. When I can't sleep, I lie in bed and I set myself an alphabet challenge, right? Which is my A to Z of something. And it could be A to Z of European cities. Yeah. It could be A to Z of cheese. I have done that, and it is almost possible. Oh. It is almost possible. That's good. I did an A to Z of industries the other day, actually with my other half, because he also couldn't sleep, and he kept saying things like, that's not an industry. Technically, that's a sector. So, you know, we did A to Z of things you'd find in a laboratory. That was really fun, because you're getting out, you know, because I brought that one up because you never get anything for X. So I thought that, you know, X-ray. Finally, I could sort of, you know, get an X for once. Yeah. Anyway, I think tonight what I'm going to do is the A to Z of things in the UK that I'm going to scrap. Yeah.
Well, how many times do we play the Doge game whenever we're together?
Doge, I know, gone. God, this is just a new version. It's just the A to Z of gone. Oh, Peter, I love having you back in the studio. Right, let's take a short break now, otherwise we'll stop rabbiting on about Lord knows what, and plan what we're going to say once the adverts have paid for my wages. See you in a moment.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
So with this virtual non-existent army and the Ukrainians with volunteer units effectively fought the Russians to a standstill on the Eastern Front in Donbass, they simply were not capable of fighting a war on both fronts. There was nothing they could do about Crimea. But I can tell anybody listening to this, having lived among Ukrainians for 2 years and indeed worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government, that Crimea...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you'll be pleased to know, instead of doing the A to Z of departments that I intend to scrap, Peter Barnes and I discussing in the advert break about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the fact that Sir Keir Starmer decided to celebrate St George's Day and sort of virtue signal towards the fact that he does like this country and he doesn't think we're all far-right thugs for having the St George's Cross. He did a photo shoot with a pork pie and Grant from EastEnders.
Yeah. Doesn't that just say everything?
Doesn't that say everything?
I mean, you could just sum it up really perfectly, because let's be real, the Labour Party have never felt very comfortable stood next to a Union Jack for quite some time now. Right. You know, and I think this has been a big part of Keir Starmer's kind of decorbinise the Labour Party image, is to say, like, we are patriotic. The fact that he had to force Labour MPs to have the Union flag on their election leaflets.
The man's a blimmin' vegetarian. Step away from the pork pie, Starmer.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous.
But
it's
this
ridiculous.
is it. So we got talking, instead of like the A to Z of gone, that actually we wanted to sort of dig over some of the worst political gimmicks. If you can think of some, text me, right? And girls, be poised in case anyone can think of really rubbish political gimmicks. The number on WhatsApp 03444991000, 87222 to text. Write the word talk before you remind me of a horrible gimmick that's cropped up in politics. But we got talking about, obviously in the top 10 has to be the Ed Stone.
It has to be. It has to be. And I'm pretty sure I've read somewhere, and please do correct me if I'm wrong on this, that it became like the foundation of a restaurant. It became like a bedrock stone. And I'm pretty sure it's here in London somewhere.
I heard it was in, someone told me it was in a sort of hangar in Hastings.
Yeah,
the mythology of where that
it's
thing
like
is.
the Ark of the Covenant, really, isn't it? Just got Indiana Jones running around trying to find the Ed Stone. Well, that's what it is. I will never understand the idea that he thought he could put that in the garden of number 10 and it would hold him accountable. No, it doesn't.
It was so
ridiculous.
weird. Was it in the garden of number 10 that it came out? Because he was Shadow at that time. Didn't he like get it out of Doncaster Racecourse or something weird?
I thought it was when he was like leader.
He's leader, but he wouldn't have been in number 10 though,
No,
but
he was going to go in number 10.
That's what he's going to be eventually, not in the fabled restaurant stroke hangar. So, you know, where is that Ed Stone?
I still want to know where's the Ed Stone. But no, that was ridiculous. I mean, you are right. This country has had some ridiculous gimmicks. I mean, Ed Davey seems to be topping the list of,
He is a gimmick.
He is a gimmick. He's a joke of an individual. The fact that that man runs like the third biggest political party in this country is a damning indictment.
It's such a red flag on society that some sort of posh birds in Waitrose like, oh, I do like that Sir Ed Davey. Wasn't it jolly when he was like running around on that jet ski and he fell off. But you do realise that the Lib Dems want hairy-faced men to come into your toilets.
Exactly. You know, and then we don't take them seriously, but yet they hold a tremendous amount of power. And it is terrifying that they're allowed to even walk amongst us at times.
Didn't they do a weird gimmick where Ed Davey was on a tractor and it burst through some hay bales? Yeah, that was
bursting the blue wall. That was that
bursting
one.
Yeah,
because that was when Boris was doing his thing, like, you know, like get Brexit done, and he had a tractor at some point or something to barge through it, barging into the red wall and all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, the gimmicks work to a degree, but we have some serious issues, and it's about time we had some serious people in our politics. You know, this standard of MPs that we've had, I'd say, in the last 3 parliaments has been dire.
Oh my, we were just discussing this not long ago. Like, what is wrong with these people? I remember when I was a little kid at school, and I was a weird kid, I used to like going home and watching the politics shows. And apparently I did a really good impression of Tom King, who was a front bencher at the time, who good and nod like that. But anyway, I remember people sitting on those benches who looked like proper wise grown-ups.
Yes.
They looked like they had a strong sense of purpose. They looked like they had a decent brain. They looked like they had conviction and ideology. Even the sort of, you know, big silver-backed gorillas of the Labour Party of old, they might not have gone to Oxford and Cambridge, but they had some sort of gusto about them, a presence, a confidence. Now everyone's just a insipid, limp loser.
Well, this is where my thing has always been. The problem of our politics is not first past the post. It's political parties. Because political parties want people to walk down corridors and vote certain ways. So what they do is they only kind of advance the people that don't have opinions, that don't have a backbone or a spine or anything. So that's how we end up with those people in our parliament. It's the political parties and the way that they choose people who will just do as they are told. We no longer have the conviction politician. You know, we're even seeing it, you know, in reform, you know, where they say you've got to follow this way. Any kind of crack, any kind of deviation is not allowed. But yet our politics and the parliament itself is designed for individuals, not political parties. I think it was Thomas Jefferson, even right back when he was alive, wrote about the dangers of the rise of the political party, you know, about how it actually kind of engulfs everything, about how they take over the operations and the mechanisms of the state, because it's no longer about voting for a person to represent you or your area. It's about how they become part of a bigger thing. And it's the real danger that we no longer have MPs like tied to the land and, you know, how they are representative of you.
Well,
they're
that's
representative
the thing,
of the party.
When people sort of parachuted around different constituencies, constituencies.
I don't agree with
and
that, yeah.
you know, I know it happens. And sometimes if you've got a safe seat and you want to make sure one of your brightest and your best gets in, I think there has to be some degree. But you can't just have someone who's not even set foot in a constituency or doesn't even know the sort of fleetingly know the area. And a lot of politicians today, I really think that they just want to be celebrities. They don't have politics. They're more concerned with not upsetting people, not losing their seat and getting their mug all over the tellies than they are about believing in something and believing in this country.
I think you're right. I think believing in something, but also having the conviction to defend that belief. You know, too many people will say, yeah, I believe in this. And then the minute that somebody has a go back, they go, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, they don't actually say, do you know what? No, I do believe in this. They don't actually defend their values anymore. And this country, for a long time, has not defended itself. It's one of the reasons we've been trampled all over by pretty much every extremist group going.
Right.
You know, we've become the home of every radical Islamic preacher I can think of.
We're basically
a
petri dish for sort of foreign nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got to change. And it comes back to the fact that we don't believe in ourselves anymore. We don't believe that our way of life is the best way of doing it. We don't believe that our culture is the best culture.
We're not allowed to.
Because we're not allowed to.
Can't do that.
But more importantly, we allowed that to be attacked from within.
Right.
We allowed the people to be elevated in our society who only want to tear it down. And we started listening to them, believing that we're the bad guys. We're not the bad guys in any way, shape or form.
But don't worry about that, because Sir Ed Davey has stepped away from the Lido. He's no longer doing water aerobics. He's come up with a policy that's going to save Britain. Because Sir Ed Davey, his big way of getting rid of all the nonsense in this country is to find people who play their music on their phones on trains. Now, I kind of agree. I hate those people. Fining doesn't go far enough always.
No.
But I also think there's a sort of... So my concern about this, someone's actually messaged saying typical Lib Dems more concerned about noise on trains than immigrants and rape gangs.
Fair.
Exactly. But my concern about this is twofold. Number one, as soon as you come up with some sort of rule based on something like noise pollution, some ninny jobs worth, some would-be little fascists...
Usually a Lib Dem.
...makes it their business to add more and more to it, and it ain't the people who are committing the crimes that they go after. And that takes me straight into number two, which is, look, we all know who the usual suspects are who do this, right? It isn't so much, sometimes I'll be looking at a video on my phone and I haven't realised the volume's up. Well, it comes out and I sort of try to turn it down. But there are people who will swagger onto the London Underground, hood up, mask on, playing their music, because it's always some sort of like gangster grind
it's never
thing.
Anything good.
Never anything good. And they do it not because they love their own music. They do it to intimidate.
Yes,
they do it to provoke. And the problem is, we know who the usual suspects are, but the police are often actively told, if it's something low level, whatever you do for the sake of community relations, you ignore it.
Yep. Because there's always somebody there with a video phone recording it, and it'll be on Twitter, and next thing you know, you'll be up in front of some tribunal because it'll be a race thing.
Oh my gosh.
You know exactly why the police do not approach these problems. And unfortunately, you're bang on, because like you said, this isn't the biggest issue, but it's the point that it's done to intimidate, it's done to scare. And that is a real problem we have in our society now, that certain people feel the need to do that. And I don't have the answer on how to stop people from never doing that. And I do think a fine is nowhere near strong enough. I think, having to walk a tightrope between the Tower Bridge might just about do it. That and the people who stand in doorways. If you stand in a doorway...
I think the punishment should be locking them up in a prison cell with their ghastly music as loud as possible on repeat for 86 hours, and then they come out the other side and go, oh, you like it, do you? Wanted to share that with everyone, did you?
Yeah, I know. I have this opinion that if you have an argument on the phone in public, you have to put it on speakerphone, because I want to hear both sides of the argument.
Oh no, but I say I hate it when people do this thing, and I've never seen an Englishman do this. It's always someone from some sunnier clime who will have their phone on loudspeaker and shout at it while holding it like that. What? Put it to your ear!
Yeah.
What is that?
I do not believe that everybody's phone is broken and that's why they have to do it, because I've complained about this
why that helps.
Yeah.
Is it because they think they're going to get like brain tumours or something?
I've
Is
no
that?
idea.
I mean, what?
I've no idea.
I've never
It's
understood
ridiculous.
what that's all about.
Yeah, but no, you're right. There is a real problem with the intimidatory nature of it, and I do think that this kind of it's antisocial behaviour is a big problem. And I think the one way that we turn this country around is we do what the Americans did, particularly Rudy Giuliani in America, and you do the broken window style policing, where you tackle this stuff, this low-level stuff, very hard, and it prevents that person progressing in crime. The problem we have now is there is no kind of punishment for the smaller crime. So the next thing is a bigger crime and a bigger crime and a bigger crime. And that's why you've got teenagers as young as 14 or 13 running around with machetes and zombie knives. Is because nobody said, do you know what? Don't shoplift. Shoplifting in this country is essentially legal now.
Yeah.
It is
No, it
absolutely
is. It is.
absurd.
It's ridiculous.
Unless you tackle this stuff at the smaller level, the big stuff is never going away.
And yet, if you're in a queue of traffic and your front wheel happens to be in a yellow box, you're going to be paying 130 quid. It actually beggars belief. Someone's just messaged saying, Alex and Pete, we united. My other half and I watch Talk Daily, and we reminisce about Saturday afternoons with you two. This hour will be the highlight of the month for sure. Yay! It's been the highlight for me. Right, we're going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. We're back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, we were just discussing our love lives then, weren't we?
Oh my God.
We almost got caught. I know, we got caught gossiping about our relationships. It's like Mean Girls in here. Anyway, right, talking about mean girls, what about mean presidents? Because Donald Trump's been blaming Zelensky for derailing these London peace talks. Every single time it doesn't work out, it's Zelensky's fault, never Putin's. Let's speak to Greg Swenson, chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Hello there, Greg.
Hello, Alex.
This is just a bevy of wonderment. I've got you, I've got Peter Barnes. Honestly, it's just like,
nice.
I feel like life can't get much better right now. Apart from you could be in the studio, that would be even better. Now,
that would be nice.
Talk to me, what is going on with Donald Trump? Because it's very hard for me. Everyone wants to see this war end, right? But it's very hard for me to make sense of a situation where just last night, Moscow, the Kremlin, rained down a load of bombs on Kiev, killing children, attacking civilians. They didn't stick to the Easter ceasefire, even though Putin's like, oh, I've put this in place. They were the ones who invaded Ukraine after all, whatever one thinks of Ukraine and whether it's corrupt or not, etc. You just don't go into countries with tanks and try and take it over. And yet when Donald Trump talks about resolving this and getting a deal done, it's always Zelensky he's blaming. Why?
Well, Alex, I have to correct you. It's not always Zelensky he's blaming. You saw some of that yesterday. But today, he came out with a scathing Truth Social post, scathing about Putin and really critical of Putin, especially for the bombing last night. And then the White House has an advert running on television here in the U.S. I'm in Washington right now. They've been running an advert very critical of Putin and basically blaming Putin. So I think that, you know, this idea that he's only blaming Zelensky is not really accurate. And although at times it seems that way, but he usually follows with a criticism of Putin. He just wants to end this war, and he's going to criticize both of them until they do.
But is he going to take the fight to Putin? Because the deal that's been drawn up so far, which most of Europe isn't happy about, most of Europe says,
right,
look, if you allow Putin to keep what he's already taken via aggression, especially if you allow him to keep all those coastal areas and start playing games with shipments of fertilizer and food, specifically to the developing world, creating global inflation again, he's gotten away with murder, and he's going to be sniffing around Latvia and Lithuania next, and they're genuinely terrified about that. And they look at this deal and say it doesn't seem to go far enough, but kind of feel like, you know, because Europe's so useless and can't agree on anything else apart from what they all dislike, that, you know, they don't really have any choice. Do you think at any point that he's going to go after Putin? Because what I've heard essentially is, yeah, the way he's going to do it is economically with drill, baby, drill, and try and scupper Russia's economy. But it doesn't seem to me like Putin's really being punished for his behaviour.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to punish Putin. I mean, I guess, you know, sanctions, yes, an embargo on Russia that could punish Putin, but he doesn't really care if his people are starving. So I'm not sure that would do it. Perhaps the only way is to beat Putin is to win this war. However, I've seen no European countries volunteer to put boots on the ground.
Oh, no. Apart from Britain, of course. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of Coalition of the Willing, he was like, we'll send everyone there, don't you worry, before anyone even made a plan. He's like, our soldiers will be gone, they'll be there, you know, we're always going to be there.
But that was post, you know, post truce or post end of the war. In her, you know, I know Keir Starmer was, you know, agreeing to provide security about the ceasefire, but not to win this war. And so it's funny, you know, I mean, look, and we thought deterrence was working in Trump's first term. It's peace through strength. It worked. He was very hostile to Putin in his first term. He's the only American president to call Putin out for killing his own people in 1999. Bush didn't do it. Clinton didn't do it. Obama didn't do it. And so, you know, he put sanctions on Nord Stream 2, which, of course, Biden took the sanctions off on Nord Stream 2. He sent Javelin missiles to Kyiv. I mean, he was very aggressive on Putin, but that was deterrence. But it's too late for deterrence, unfortunately. So now he just wants to end this thing. Not everyone will be happy with it. And, you know, I guess the only alternative would be to continue the stalemate and have more body bags.
Yeah, that is a good point. How do you stop Putin without essentially going and, you know, picking a fight that might turn into an international brawl that could become a third world war?
4,500 nuclear weapons in his possession. So that's dangerous.
Gosh. Let's talk now about the trade war with China and all of these tariffs. There's a suggestion he's considering backing down on his trade war with China because the US economy is suffering, that he could cut tariffs on imports to between 50 and 65%. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, and that's amid fears that the damage being wrought on the world's biggest economy is just too much. Do you think this, what he's been doing in terms of his, you know, obsession with tariffs and throwing tariffs about the place like, well, I don't know, like what, I can't finish that sentence. But do you think it's been, do you think it's been a good policy? Has he been a bit overzealous with it, perhaps?
Well, I think he's overzealous because he's President Trump. He's provocative, he's unorthodox. This is really important for the long run. And in the short run, he's going to take some heat from it. His polling, you know, his polling is down, his numbers are down, but he's willing to live with that because in the long term, this will work. And it's not really that big a deal for the U.S. economy. A lot of the Western press, especially the American liberal press, has made a big deal out of this and saying it's inflationary and it's a tax on the consumer. I mean, I've never seen the Democrats see a tax they didn't love. So it's kind of funny coming from the Democrats and the left that, oh, taxes are bad. And they are bad. I'm not arguing for taxes, but these are necessary to realign the economy from you know, to less consumption, more production, and also realign the Chinese economy from less production, more consumption. We can't continue funding this balance with 36 trillion in debt. We're bankrolling the NATO with we're paying $1 trillion in debt service a year. So, we can't do it all. So I think it's important that he does this. He's taking some heat for it. I don't think it's justified, but anything that Trump does, gets a lot of heat from the left and the media. Same thing in the U.S. So I think it'll work in the long run, and he's willing to sit through some difficult polling to get there.
I mean, one thing that definitely did work is under Trump 1.0, when he said, I want a trade deal with Brexit Britain, the government just said, chlorinated chicken, no thanks, we're still best mates with Brussels. And now he's thrown some tariffs about the place. Idiot Rachel Reeves is actually doing something quite sensible, which is saying, right, let's get a trade deal and quick. But my concern is, and I don't know, because I get the impression that part of the tariff thing is about also exacting certain conditions from trading partners, whether it's make sure that fentanyl doesn't cross my border, make sure those migrants aren't being bussed into, your hinterlands to come here. With the UK, I'd imagine it's going to be don't cozy up too much to the EU, protect freedom of speech, and whatever games you're playing with China right now, you should probably stop. And yet, I kind of feel like those are things that the Labour Party aren't going to be able to live up to.
Well, Alex, you bring up some great points, and I'm not sure they can either. But if they were smart, they would, because not only would it please President Trump, it would please the UK voters, who are the ones that are suffering under Labour right now. And so, it would be really great if they opened the market to US products. So it's not just tariffs, it's non-tariff trade barriers, like chlorinated chicken, which I find hysterical because it's so stupid. But it's, look, the American chicken is 21% cheaper than British chicken. I love British chicken, don't get me wrong, but it's really important to have free and fair trade, and right now it's not free and fair. So I think the UK consumer would benefit from American chicken. It has, it's chlorinated chlorinated cleansed, but it also has 2% salmonella versus 15% in the UK. So I'd rather have chlorine than salmonella, personally.
Yeah, it's exactly the same chlorine we put in our water and put on our salads. But one thing I don't understand here, Greg, right, is when it comes to all the things that America might be desperate to be able to sell into Britain, I didn't realise chicken was so important. I'd imagine you've got plenty of chicken eaters yourself. I mean, all the chicken manufacturers in America going, we really got to get into Britain. I didn't think that was sort of product number one.
Yeah. And it might not be, Alex. I think it's just one that the EU and the UK, even post-Brexit, like to bring up as a reason not to have that evil American food in the country. Right. So, it really doesn't matter statistically. And you know what, frankly, international trade, even with China, it's 2% of U.S. GDP. It's not like we're dependent on trade like Canada and Mexico are, and the Germans for sure. So all this fear of economic destruction in the United States is totally overblown. And frankly, it's probably overblown in the UK too.
It's such a weird thing. You just get idiots repeating chlorinated chicken. What about the chlorinated chicken? And they don't understand that it was the EU who invented the sort of myth of the demon chlorinated chicken, because they want the UK to subscribe to all of their phyto rules and their sort of like, litany of regulations when it comes to agriculture and bendy bananas. But this is the same EU that presided over the donkey meat scandal. People were getting their takeaways to find out that, things like Rudolph and red rum were in it.
Yeah, it's funny. And what they should do is just deregulate and liberate their economies. They won't, but that's what they should do. That's what the voters want. But these center-right and center-left parties refuse to listen to the voters, so they still talk about, the existential crisis of climate change instead of liberating their economies and letting people, have wage growth.
The existential crisis of chlorinated chicken. Greta Thunberg will be on that bandwagon, I'll tell you that much. Peter, I could see out the corner of my eye scribbling away there like an enthusiastic little clerk. Share your thoughts.
Hi, Greg. It's nice to see you.
Hello, Peter.
So my thing, I'll run through, Trump and Zelensky. The reason Trump is going after Zelensky is that Trump is legacy hunting. Let's not forget, this is the last time he can be president. He's trying to build the legacy of the president that prevented World War III. That's what he's looking for. So he's doing everything he can to bring the people to the table, and it's easier to keep blaming the guy who's not got nuclear weapons than it is to blame the guy who's got nuclear weapons. That's what that's all about. Trump and tariffs. the first sign of weakness on Trump's part came when he said all this applies to all the tariffs apart from smartphones and laptops and things like that, because it was a huge sector and it was a huge part of all of it. And the minute that that started to kind of wane a little bit, the whole thing was going to come tumbling down. Donald Trump has proven very rightly that America has been taken for a free ride for too long, and he's right to bring that up. But the way that he's went about it was, you know, too gung-ho, too bull in a china shop, typical Trump. But he's not wrong in principle. And you have to look at the number of countries that have gone to the White House now that want a free trade agreement, that he's actually put free trade back in the political arena, that it hasn't been for quite a long time. Now, Rachel Reeves is on the issue of China. She's right, as it was in a Telegraph piece a couple of weeks ago, to say that the UK cannot back away from Beijing, which is what America want, because you are right, a huge part of these trade deals is don't do this in terms of fentanyl, don't do this in terms of China and all that kind of stuff, because Beijing and the UK are so interlinked now. The amount of Chinese money sloshing around public institutions is terrifying. They are in our nuclear stations, they are in our gas stations, they're in our energy sector, they're in our universities, they are everywhere. America is bang on to keep saying, what do you think you're doing, allowing them running amok inside of you? It is absolutely obscene to me that it's ever got that far. But the idea that we could just pull all that away, I don't think it's as easy as many of the people in the Trump administration think it should be. But yet we have to start winding that back. This is the issue of UK and China is a huge problem, and it's a complicated issue because, you know, our university sector, I think it's 50 million quid a year they give in terms of endowments and bursaries. They basically fund most universities. You know, it's absolutely obscene to me that it's been allowed to get this far. And the big one that we don't talk about is the amount of Chinese ownership of property. The property market is dominated by Chinese corporations. And the minute that we start tinkering around saying China can't do this, China can't do that, they start to mess around with our property market. You think food's expensive now? Wait till we go into real recession, which is what China is capable of doing. One of the reasons I think Trump has backed off is he's actually seen that when China flexes its economic might, it has a huge ripple effect. And every one of America's allies is going, please don't.
Well, it owns a third of the world's debt, doesn't it? It owns more world debt than the IMF, the ECB, or the OECD nations put together.
When people start to understand that, you know, China doesn't
and
need...
all the minerals.
I mean, even when I was back at university, we always said that Russia will invade you. China will simply repossess you, because they already own you, you know. And we talk about how, like, Putin infects certain nations in terms to get his own way. China buys its way in. It has bought its way into the United Kingdom, and Trump and the White House is right to say you've got to stop this. But I think we're so far down the road now that just to pull the rug, I don't think is possible. But we have to find a way to wind it back. And even if it takes Donald Trump being as brazen as he is to say this to our faces, it should have been said 20, 30 years ago for someone to go, stop. And that's the reality of it.
Thankfully, finally, someone is. Unfortunately, we are going to have to stop this segment, because we've got to take an advert break, the last advert break of the show, in fact. Greg, it was lovely having you on the show. Next time, come down here. He always smells lovely, Greg. He's a very classy man.
He's also a really nice man.
Oh, he's the nicest man on earth.
He's the nicest person I've ever met.
He's always the first to buy a round of drink, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. He's one of my best friends. Right, we're going to take a short advert break now, but when we come back, you can catch up with Barnsley and I. It's not often we get to do this. It's like the good old days. So why don't you join us? 03444 991 1000 is the number to call, or text on WhatsApp, or 87222. If that's on SMS, put talk before your message. See you in a moment.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. On all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
So with this virtual non-existent army and the Ukrainians with volunteer units effectively fought the Russians to a standstill on the Eastern Front in Donbass, they simply were not capable of fighting a war on both fronts. There was nothing they could do about Crimea. But I can tell anybody listening to this, having lived among Ukrainians for 2 years and indeed worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government, that Crimea is absolutely
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back. Do you know what? I am absolutely spoilt for choice, right? Because not only have I got the whimsical little elf that is Peter Barnes, the silverback of surrealism himself has come in. It is Ash Gold, ladies and gentlemen. I saw him through the glass and I was like, I want everything to be as odd as possible. So I was like,
that's why I'm here, man.
Yeah, I was like, I want both Barnesy and Ash in at the same... I don't know what's going to happen.
Are you dreaming? It's like, what a crazy world.
There's a fine line between a dream and
She said
nightmare.
it's like being at the zoo with us.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I got called a scrawny little creature about
well,
by the time I came in.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ash could eat you for breakfast.
No, God.
If there was any meat on you. Right, now let's listen to some voice notes, shall we?
Voicio.
Voicio! This is Jim.
Good evening, Alex. It's Jim from North London here. A couple of times I've been on a bus with somebody who's been on the phone, shouting away down the phone without a care in the world for anybody else around them. I mean, really bad. I noticed that absolutely everyone was tutting and huffing and puffing. So I just casually walked right up to her and put my music on my phone really loud right next to her head. She moved and got off the bus very rapidly, and I had applause from everyone. And I just felt like saying, guys, you shouldn't have to wait for me to do it. If we all did it, it'd be the end of it. Huff, huff, huff.
Now, what sort of music do you reckon Jim was blasting out of his phone there?
That whatchamacallit, you know, the very dangerous one that kids are watching.
What, grime?
Grime, yeah.
You think Jim's a grime head?
No, I think, was it called Trap? Is that the new one?
Is that the latest one?
I think that's
he knows all the latest things.
No, I know things that merely because people tell me them, not because I choose to know about them.
It isn't grime, it isn't trap, it's another single syllable. Drill.
Drill, that's
It's drill.
But if someone plays music, I think you should sort of do a dance and express yourself on public transport.
That would be quite fun.
You have to be very careful with the phrase express yourself on public transport, but...
that's right.
Sometimes you see someone who spends the night on the tube and he's done just that.
Obviously, people always say that London's like nobody talks to each other. It's because there's a very real possibility that somebody has a knife. This is one of the reasons that people don't confront anyone for these situations, because you don't know how it's going to end.
I mean, Jim, you heard Jim saying, oh, tut and huff. I mean, he might be like packing, mightn't he? He sounds like a scary man.
People rush to violence, don't they, these days?
They do. They do, actually.
And very, with a knife violence, not even a punch, you know?
Yeah, and it's one of these things, when somebody nicks your phone and you can do that find my phone thing, the number of people that go after it, I'm like, just get a new phone.
Let it go.
Just because you don't know what the person at the other end who's got your phone is actually going to be like. It's not a very sensible thing to do.
It is not. Right, let's listen to another voice note. This is Steve.
Good evening, Alex. I don't know if this counts as political gimmicks, right? But Neil Kinnock has given us two of the greatest ones ever. The first one was, of course, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to walk on the water, and fell straight into the Brighton Sea. And then, of course, there was, we're all right, we're all right, just before they got absolutely crushed in the election. Brilliant memories. I just hope to see Starmer go through the same fate, especially falling into the sea.
That's what Ed Davey does these days. What was that? We're all right.
Oh, it was a classic moment when they were just about to win the election. I think it was 2 days before, and he seemed to be too overexcited, and he went up to the podium like a rock star, and he just went, to the crowd, "We're all right," and then all the crowd roared, and then he looked a bit stupid. He did it 3 times, and it looked terrible. And I think it really put people off. That was the main thing.
Was it worse than Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich?
Well, that's the first rule of politics. If you never drink or eat on camera, because nobody looks attractive when they're doing it.
He doesn't look attractive at any time.
Yeah, but that's true.
He always looks a bit like he looks a bit, not right, and it does seem not right.
It's always one of those things, because you remember there was the picture of Theresa May trying to eat an ice cream, and nobody looks good when they're trying to eat, because the way cameras work is they take like 10 photos at a time, don't they? So
and you get the eyes and the mouth.
Yeah, it's never a good idea.
When she did that dancing as well,
whichever advisor decided to keep her dancing should never work in professional politics ever
but
again.
Trump, it works for some reason. It's a similar dance he does.
Oh, the Trump dance is amazing.
Trump is the anomaly, not the rule.
Yeah, he breaks the mold.
Because too many people keep trying to say, "Oh, well, Donald Trump can do it." Yes, because he's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You've got to have the personality and the bravado of him. If you're like a Theresa May type figure and you start behaving like Donald Trump, you're going to look a bit foolish, and it's not going to work for you.
He's a New Yorker, isn't he?
Yeah, and that kind of.
Also, let's be fair. I mean, Trump looks like a weird thing anyway, doesn't he?
He's like Biff from Back to the Future, isn't he? He was like a prediction almost. You know,
a little bit,
I've never seen Back to the Future.
How is that? When people say things like that, how is that possible?
Did you learn it in history at school? It's that important.
Did you not have ITV when you were growing up? It's like when people say they've never seen a James Bond film. How? How is that possible? I don't understand that.
It's still worth watching even when you're older,
definitely.
isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, because I only got round to watching The Matrix like a couple of weeks ago.
I still got, because I stopped about half an hour in about years ago, and I've never quite. It got a bit too cerebral. So I red pilled myself.
I'm going to say, but the whole concept of red pilling comes from The Matrix.
Yeah.
And do you take the blue pill or the red pill?
Yeah. And what comes from Back to the Future? Flux capacitors.
Yeah, and the kind of
well, we're going the DeLorean.
Well, we're going. We don't need roads.
Also, frankly, my dad, because he does look like the Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you remember Taxi? He was in Taxi. You're too young. Taxi.
Yeah, I'm too young for that.
No,
Danny DeVito. That was his first big role.
No, he's in a lorry in my youth.
It was great.
Right, let's speak to John, who's in West Lothian while we still have time. John, welcome to the, whatever this is, madhouse, the animal farm.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. I just want to talk about, you were on about earlier on about the quality of politicians.
Oh, right.
Yes, absolute rubbish. And this started when they started to introduce quotas of various people that they wanted in. They didn't have any sense or ability. And I think it's even worse at local level, because local politicians, councillors, etc., should be there to represent their communities. And unfortunately now they just take party lines irrespective of what the community wants. And I think this is one of the biggest problems. They forget who actually elect them and ultimately who pay for them.
Yeah, you're right, John. I just don't know what has happened. The quality... I mean, there's that weird one in the Labour Party, isn't there? It's like 2 years old who looks like the Mekong.
Oh, you're going to have to narrow the weird one in the Labour Party.
It's like the youngest one of who's been elected. He's literally... I'm not sure if he started puberty, and he's got like a forehead that beats Rihanna's.
Yes, I know.
It's
like the Star Wars bar in Parliament now, isn't it?
Oh, God, yeah,
it is, funny things rumbling around.
Strange hair.
Well, I don't know, Ash. I'm not sure you've really got a leg to stand on that particular line of critique.
No, they always do say that what politics is Hollywood for ugly people or something
like
that.
Show business for ugly people.
That's the one. And the standards have just